All right, welcome everybody to Select Board meeting. And I want to thank the Select Board and Joy and Renee for changing the date because I had a conflict from last Wednesday. I appreciate that. So we try not to do that. People get used to it. They know what's on TV on Wednesday, Select Board meeting, but tonight it's Monday. And also, we got a lot on our agenda. And we have, if everybody's had a busy day like I have, it's hard to get your mindset on it, but, you know, my intention is to get my mind on this meeting. Give everybody a chance to weigh in. I'll try to keep it moving, but if you have, you know, more to say or something else we should add, just let me know. All right, so I'll call the meeting to order, 7 o'clock. Any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda? And executive session, we're not doing that tonight, okay. And any public comment besides what's on the agenda? No, I guess not. All right, so for item 3 and 4, Joan and Missy are here to go over an annual review we have of reserve funds and assigned fund balance. Do you want to come on up to the front here?
Guest of honor seat, you can bring your own chair.
Right, BYOC.
BYOC. There we go.
And there's an expectation we would approve these, right? Do we have to do a formal approval?
Yeah, just make a
Okay.
motion.
Yeah. And it's something that we try to get done before the audit every
Yeah.
year, and the audit is tomorrow.
So no time like that.
Yeah.
So did you want him to approve it tonight?
That would be good.
So there were 2 sheets you gave us, I think. Which one do we want to do the first, the reserve funds?
Sure. Yeah.
This is 3A in our packet.
So this is the annual,
It's coming. It is. Yeah, having some problems.
I was trying to figure out if it was my glasses that were the problem.
Can you, did you adjust this? Yeah, I had adjusted it, but your font is pretty tiny.
Back the other way, a little more. That's, yeah. Right. Can you see it? You've got it in front of you there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and we've got it on our screens,
Okay.
right? So,
That's better.
yeah, that is much better. Yeah. So these are reserves we've assigned for certain things that we didn't spend, basically.
Yeah, and some of them are things that are kind of required to be kept,
Yes.
in a special fund, so.
Do we want to go over them? Well, so things we have to keep are like the reappraisal. We get that money a little bit every year, and we've got 65,000 waiting, but reappraisal's a couple $100,000
Right,
or more
right.
when it comes around. We just did it a couple years ago.
Yeah, we
So we're
finished.
saving
Yeah.
now for the next time we might
Correct.
have to do it.
Yep. And, go ahead, did you have a question?
Yeah, the Vermont gas thing that came up last year, and there it is sitting there, and as I recall, we were going to invest it, but I don't think we ever took any action on that.
I think we had a lot of questions about what the motion was when we did it. And I don't know that I think we got clarification on it, but we haven't really taken any action on it.
Right, right.
One thought was to invest it and use those investments for education, stewardship education, that kind of thing. So it's still just sitting there. And it's not gaining any value, huh? It's not an investment? Or
well,
would-
so this money is set aside on the general ledger, which means it's not part of the fund balance. And so by putting them in these reserves, they sit by themselves on the general ledger, and then you get to the fund balance. As far as the actual money, isn't necessarily sitting one place or another, because there's always money coming in and money going out from the town. And so it's invested the same, or not invested, it's in the same place that the town's money is, which is in insured accounts at the bank, and they're in sweep accounts. So there is some interest that comes from that.
But that would just go to the general fund, the
Right,
interest,
yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I'd agree that this is something, ideally we should address in the next, maybe this budget season and sort of decide specifically what are we going to do with it. It's not doing any good just sitting there.
But as you know, the interest rates are so low that it's not quite the same as it might have been at other times.
Exactly,
Yeah.
so it's maybe not pressing, maybe it's in a safe place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other things are, no surprises there.
So the records restoration, and the next two columns, the records restoration and records print, bind, and microfilm are money that comes into the town for some of the fees collected by the town clerk's
Yeah.
office and can be spent on certain items.
Yeah.
And so that's what those are setting aside.
And I actually do anticipate spending a fair amount of those over the next couple of years, because we've been working on getting electronic records going, and so that's why we did spend about,
see that, yeah.
$7,000 on having stuff converted, and then we're attaching it to our land records on the computer. So then when searchers come in, they're gonna be able to go on a computer kiosk and, rather than going in the vault. So, which will be good.
So reappraisal was mentioned. We had 19,000 in the budget, spent 19,209, so the reserve went down by $9. The land preservation fund, that is for the Hinesburg Land Trust, and that's a specific article at town meeting.
For the $1,500, yeah, each year we decide how much, and I think the last couple of years it's been $1,500. And it's applied when there is a land trust project.
Right.
It's a small portion that leverages more money. I think we just did the farm,
Yeah. On
not
O'Neill
too
Road,
long ago.
yeah.
Yep. Okay,
All right. The next one, Conservation Commission, you'll see that the amount to be reserved, the beginning and the anticipated to be approved did not change because we don't typically reserve their regular budget
Yeah.
unless it was for a specific project. So nothing changed in that column.
okay,
The Vermont Gas Funds, this is money towards it's going to be $3,000 a year until 2026. So we received that $3,000 and they spent $2,250, and that was all spent on warbler habitat. So now the town has met the requirement for spending at least $1,000.
the minimum requirement
Yeah.
for
Right.
that.
Right.
Yep,
Okay, so that's adding that. This fire department landscaping has been there for a very long
Right.
time.
I think that's maybe part of the Act 250 or something that was, or maybe,
I think it was set aside as part of that, the public safety facility.
Yeah.
Landscaping, and then,
To meet the site
I thought it
plan.
was even
Yeah.
longer ago than that.
it was
It's really
been-
long.
I think.
Yeah.
maybe, yeah.
And I think it's been held for like a final plan because it's always sort of up in the air exactly what's happening. We put the
Right.
road in,
Yeah. But I mean, that's, that's one thing you guys could talk about at some point, about whether you want to keep it or just, let it go back. into
it'd
the
be
general
interesting to
fund.
know what the restrictions are for that money. So if we could dig that up, because, potentially working on lot 1 around that area, would that be something it could be used for?
Yeah.
When the reserve fund was created, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. I doubt there are any restrictions on it, from a legal standpoint.
Woo-hoo. We should find that out, I guess, because that might be a good,
Yeah.
There might be
Yeah.
a file like in the town
Maybe,
administrator's
I
yeah.
just think that's
office.
from way back when they did the last edition of the
I
fire
think so.
station.
Yeah, you could be right. And then just never spent it, so, I mean, but you guys would, in that case, have the authority
Yep.
to just release it.
So is that something you could let
Yeah.
us know?
Mhm.
Okay. good?
And then the July 4th fund, if they do fundraising,
Yeah.
that they don't spend, that money just gets added to their to their reserve funds.
I just got a update from Al. That
Okay.
was the required landscaping for
Oh.
the addition in 1999.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So it's
So
been
we should
sitting there
still-
for a while.
Yeah, we should still find out, you know, what, if there are restrictions on it. Obviously, we talked with Al on that, and, you know, wouldn't want to spend his money if he's got plans for it.
Right.
Select board meetings are
Of
the
course.
best entertainment in town. just saying.
Thank you, Al.
All right.
All right, are there any other questions? Pretty straightforward. So we would need a motion to approve the FY19 reserve funds.
So moved?
Second?
Any more discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, so that motion passed, thank you. Next item is the assigned fund balance. And that is 3B in our packet. Oh, maybe 4A, sorry.
So this,
4A.
can I speak?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
first page is the summary of all of the next pages. So for example, if you looked at the first line, highway, road, and bridge, you have what the fund balance was at the beginning of the year, increases, decreases, and then the ending balance. And so then if you flip to the first page, the next page, the first one there is the highway, road, and bridge. And so that's just divided there between some stormwater planning was increased by 2,500, 2,450 was spent, so that went up by $50. And the rest of it is unallocated fund balance, which just means it's part of that fund, but it's not designated for one specific thing, like stormwater planning. The next one is gravel and culverts. Again, it's how much is designated for it, less what has been spent. And these are the items that show in the budget as capital transfer. That's where the money comes from on these. The next one, the 602 funds, the highway equipment, these are specific pieces of equipment and the payments on them. And then the fund balance adjustment just sort of moves them down to zero so that we're not carrying $8.26 towards a particular piece of equipment to next year. So nothing unusual there. I mean, everything is planned for and paid for.
So, one question I had here is the highway garage. It still shows
On next one.
339,000. Is that because some bills from the new building hadn't been paid yet?
There are more things, and with the restoration project and things that were all included in that project.
So the beginning balance was the bond, what money we had started with, and that's how much we spent, and that's the remainder to be spent.
That's what we spent.
And
this
some of
year.
it is planned to be spent on part of the
Yeah,
project.
Yep.
And that's just the current year spent.
Yes.
The next is specific items in the buildings and grounds. Nothing particular unexpected there.
And the town forester, see that increase of 20,647.48, that's their logging revenue.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Are they all done with the logging, or are they doing more, do you know?
They will be doing more,
Oh, okay.
yes, yeah, it'll be
Good.
going on for
All
a
right.
couple of years.
So that retainer, then, we're gonna hold on to
Yes.
for another,
Yeah.
okay.
And that's not included here. The retainer is somewhere else.
Okay.
Not part of this funds.
So does that revenue go to the general fund?
I think it stays with the general forest specifically, so that they use towards other projects with the forest.
And that's one of the reasons they didn't ask for any money for their regular budget this year, because they knew they were gonna be getting the revenue from the logging,
Yeah.
so.
And I think that's, looks inflated, and it's, as far, because there are expenses associated with the logging too, right?
That's the
No,
actual
no,
revenue that
that's-
comes
It
in
is.
Yeah.
after, so the logger, when they get paid for the wood, then
They
The
give
they
us
take
a
leftover.
their
percentage.
cut
Okay.
and they give us a percentage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they drop off the checks.
What's the grant funding line?
What was that grant?
That's not the,
It's not the sidewalk, is it?
I'm trying to remember what item it was.
18, 19.
well, it's on.
Okay, it's zero.
I'm trying to think of, I can't remember off the
can
top of
go-
my head. Okay, yeah,
Okay.
if you want to know, sure.
Here, let me
Okay.
talk about this.
All right. Or look in the file, the drawer, whatever you want to do. So yeah, Bissonnet Fields, the balance that you have left is the 45,424.44. And you're planning to use some of that for various things? Yeah. Okay,
When we get to it.
yeah.
It's good to know that we still have that much after
Yeah,
it's done, though. That's
yeah, I
good.
know, it's really
Absolutely.
amazing, so. Okay, and then while she's looking for that, we'll go to the planning and zoning.
Yeah,
It was Village North and Village South. It was the
Sidewalks.
Sidewalks.
them.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
605s. Yeah, that's what it was.
I mean, they're accounted for separately in the general ledger,
Right.
but, yeah.
And, yeah, the Route 116 CVU road intersection. But, so it's just the money came in and the money went out.
Oh, is that what, it's not
It's-
Village North then, it's the
well,
Route
it's those
116? Oh,
It's all three of those.
I don't know. Let's see, okay, planning and zoning. They still
No
have their.
change.
Yeah, no change.
And fire department, so some money designated for rescue equipment, scuba units, and rescue pumper. And so the second and third of those, then you see the money coming in from general fund and the payment
Yeah.
that's made. And then the rescue equipment, that money is mostly still there. And the police department, we combined the mobile data terminal and a computer into a line just called police technology. So not quite as specific. And the payments on the Ford Explorer and the Chevy Tahoe. And some money set aside for the town server and a little bit spent.
And the website, well, that's this year, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's zero set aside for it from last year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, 'cause
But
this
in
is
this
as of
current,
Tuesday.
right, but in the
Yeah,
current
it'll
fiscal
show
year,
us,
there's not-
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You bought a Chevy Tahoe for the police department? I thought
What's
we were
that?
going to those Ford Interceptors.
We did, but then the last one they did, the Tahoe, because of what they talked about with the hill roads, that they needed the four-wheel,
I thought the others were four-wheel drive, but,
something with the Tahoe.
yeah. It wasn't.
Just have 2 more years on them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So any other questions?
Do you like this format for, for kind of,
Yeah,
you know?
it's pretty
being-
straightforward, yeah.
Okay, good.
All right, so if we're happy with it, we could make a motion to approve the revolving loan fund balance,
Assigned fund balance.
assigned fund balance, thanks. Thanks, never mind, that's the next one. I told you I had a long day before we started.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. All right, so this is the assigned fund balance as of 6/30/19. Any more questions? Questions for me? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Jeff, you're all set?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. So that motion passed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now we're on item 5, the revolving loan fund balance. And in our packet was some policy guidelines that I think we approved a year or so ago.
I
Yeah.
figured I'd have them in there for a refresher.
And this is our first application,
It certainly
official
is.
application. So we've been hoping for this.
As have we.
So,
long time.
you know, just introduce yourself. I
Yeah,
guess.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm Andrew Frost. I think I know many of you.
Yeah.
Will Edelson, I work at National Bank of Millbury.
Okay, yeah.
And we also have with us a number of the members of the revolving fund here for posterity and support. So it was really just a refresher that many of you, looks like you're aware of this fund. It's been sitting on the town books. This is around 2012 that myself and some of the folks started the Economic Development Commission with the town. And part of that was a revolving loan fund. And our mission really was to set up a mechanism for which we could administer the revolving loan funds, which, again, for your information, they were funded by the Saputo factory, payback of the community development block grant, and their real goal is for investment in the community, redeploying of this money so that we can encourage economic development in the town. So I think the balance sits at around 200,000, Renee,
I
ish.
believe so.
We're somewhere in that range. And we've had, over the years, as part of the committee, you know, various marketing efforts and outreach to businesses in the community. And, you know, obviously we hadn't, you know, we'd had some nibbles, but never any applications. And in the recent periods of time, we've had more interest, 2 applications. And so it was really this refreshing of, hey, what was our processes? Who do we talk to? Some of this stuff had gone a little stale. Because as you might remember, we chose the Addison County Economic Development Committee to be
Their
our administrator.
model, right,
Their
yeah.
model. We had a lot of support. The town actually reimbursed some of their constituents for support. So that we really felt like we had a stronger backbone for the town and really put some rigor, or help put some rigor around the kind of process you want to have when you're loaning money for economic development. So Robin Shao, I think it was it Robin? Shu was very helpful, and now her successor,
Fred
Kenny's been, and so we have a few things to work on relative to the memorandum of understanding, but we took the time as a committee in the last couple of weeks to review the application, review our mission, you know, what are we trying to help the town with, and fortunately, one of the members of the committee that joined in the last year is Will Edelson, who works for a bank, and that was really helpful for us to bring on the discipline of lending, which he really understands really well. Not to say that was the only decision, you know, that I mean the only inputs that helped us, but Will's inputs were really helpful to sort of evaluate loans vis-a-vis how you might do it in an industry where lending is pretty common. But this kind of lending in this scenario has a little different, angle based on economic development. So, again, that's sort of the background. The goal, our process really is to review the applicants and come to you with a recommendation about whether or not we support the lending of the money. And then you all have the decision to approve. From there, if it were approved, there's a process we'll go through with the economic Addison County, which would essentially have the applicant review loan documents. And similar to how we might do a loan on our house, there's covenants and stipulations that an applicant would go through, and then a release of funds would come through the town's bank and to the applicant. If I got it all right, Renee?
I think so,
Pretty
yes.
close.
Then there would be a closing that would happen just like any other.
Just like any other
Yeah.
loan. So again, our first time, your first time, so I think that's probably gonna create a lot of questions, and that's great. That's why the whole team's here, and
Yeah.
we wanted to, take the time on our first applicant. Hopefully there's many more. We've got some other interest, and again, it's all about investing and finding ways to encourage economic development in the town, which is good generally.
Yeah.
So I'll introduce,
Yeah,
Will
go ahead.
introduced himself.
So, I guess I'll go over the loan presentation like I would at regular board committee. It's pretty straightforward. The borrow, it'd be TC Hospitality. The guarantors would be Travis and Miriam Counter. Loan amount is for $50,000, and the purpose of the loan is to purchase the assets from Good Times Cafe. The terms that we have agreed upon would be 3 months interest only, and then 60 payments of P&I. The loan rate would be 8% fixed for 5 years, and based on the loan amount, it'd be approximately $1,013.82 a month. The management, it'd be mainly Travis and his wife Marion. Travis is a graduate from Johnson & Wales University with a degree in hotel and restaurant management. He's been in the food and service industry for approximately 15 years. And you can see his resume is attached in the 4th page here. Kind of gives a rundown of what he's done. Not just being a chef, but it's also HR. It's also the finances. So he definitely brings more to this than just being a cook, if you will, a chef. And the team here, we were in support of this loan. Members present were myself, Melissa, Andrew, and Steve. If you look on the 3rd page, the financials, which is the most important part of it, is can you pay back the loan? So he worked with Vita to prepare all of his projections. Balance sheet, there was probably 30 pages, and that kind of is consolidated into one sheet that is much easier than having to scroll through back and forth. So, based on the projections for 2019, available to service debt after he's paid all his expenses would be approximately $88,000, which in the banking world, generally what we want to see is debt service coverage of 1.25 times, and based on his projections, they're at 3.63, which is above what I would say normally you would see. I did run the same numbers based on actual Good Times Cafe revenue, and they were still at like 1.2 to 1.5, which is still well within what I would want to see from a banking standpoint, as enough money to service this debt. So year 2, approximately $110,000 in net revenue after expenses, 4.56% or 4.56 to 1 debt coverage ratio. Again, these numbers are based on his projections that Vita himself helped prepare. And that's kind of
Probably it, yeah.
That's kind of it. in a
Yeah, I
nutshell.
think that the last thing, again, does this meet sort of our mission? And, if you look at the use of funds, this really goes to, keeping a vibrant downtown. We'll potentially keep businesses from closing. So we felt that this was a good sort of match with what the RLF fund is trying to do with business in Hinesburg.
So I just have a couple questions.
Sure.
Sort of getting back to the very beginning. So there's about 200,000 in the
There is,
account.
yes.
And was it Vermont Smoke and Cure who used it originally?
Yes.
So are they continuing to pay it back?
I think
So
they're
it's-
almost done.
Is it?
It's gonna be $250 when it gets.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
will go up to 250, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so that's good. And if we didn't use it, it would end up going back to the state.
There's a potential for the
Yeah.
state to take the
Right.
money, that's
So
right.
that's
that-
good. And
That's
it's-
another urgency for us too.
Yeah.
We've met with them and, they've highlighted, some of that possibility. Hence also the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
desire to lend.
But it doesn't sound like our desire to lend has, it looks like
It
you've looked
didn't-
at this loan
was a
closely,
good
which
fit.
is good. And so what's the advantage for somebody taking this loan versus going to the commercial bank for,
From a, the ease of funds, is pretty much what it's, what's for. From a banking standpoint, our guidelines are more strict.
yeah,
So this kind of gives more leniency to the borrower to access funds.
We do have a risk premium. We're probably a little bit higher.
Yeah,
We're a little bit higher too. So we
Yeah.
carry a risk premium for that additional,
maybe for a borrower who doesn't have a big,
asset.
yeah, right,
Right.
or, somebody new to something, so that makes sense, yep. Those are the questions I had. Any questions? Jeff? No?
Could we get your names again?
Oh, that's Scooter, just,
Will Eggleston.
And Andrew Frost?
he keeps us on our toes.
This-
This is great.
Great.
So we would need to make a motion. And so after we approve it, then you follow through with the finishing the loan.
With the
processes.
ACEDC and then the loan borrower.
Okay.
Yep.
And so, using the Addison group, so I guess if you'd asked me about it, I thought they helped us get started, but they actually continue to stay in the process.
They have some software that'll help with
Okay.
both billing out and recoupment of funds, and they'll also, if there's an issue with late payment, apply appropriate fees.
So they manage that.
They manage, they
manage
basically
it.
manage for a fee, we do pay them.
Yep, yep,
Yeah, but it's a small amount,
yeah.
and allotted within our admin fee.
Right.
We do have
So
an admin
the
fee.
state is looking at your funds and saying, you're allowed to spend a
You're
little
allowed to
bit
use,
toward
yeah,
that.
yep.
Yeah.
10%, I think.
Okay,
for
That's
the-
Melissa Levia, in
yeah.
case you didn't know who she was.
Alex, did you have some question?
Yeah, just from the peanut gallery. Yay, cheerleading
Yeah.
support.
Yes, yes.
So I was here when we did the original loan, pass-through funding through the CDBG program to Vermont Smoking Cure. And part of the parameters for that funding was they were gonna create a certain number of jobs that were available to low to moderate income folks. Do we have to, does this project also have to produce such a thing, or are we free of that encumbrance with the use of the revolving loan fund?
It's not as specific, but the loans are really there for the establishment of new businesses, expansion. It can be working capital. It does not have to be new jobs specifically.
And in this particular project, they're looking to hold on to the jobs that are there currently.
Correct.
Potentially expand based on their business plan,
I
or,
think just starting to
Maintain.
retain at this point.
yeah.
Something about
Yeah.
a credit card device too, I think was part of their.
Yeah. All right, I thought it was jambalaya had to stay.
Sorry, they're the only place in town that takes cash only, so
Gotta respect that too.
gotta respect that.
Yeah. All right, any more questions? Seems like we're excited to move this forward.
Great.
So, yeah,
Yeah, thank you for
Right.
your work on this.
Well, right now, we have another application in front of us, and so we're reviewing it with the applicant, and we hope to present at your next meeting. We do have some questions as a team
Help me out.
to review, but, so you might see
Right.
another
Yeah.
application soon. And just so you know, the loan ranges are 5 to 50. So the
Okay.
idea is not to loan it all at once
Yeah.
and to look for different investments. And we're usually, as Will said, a backstop. We're not the primary lender.
yeah,
So again, that's a little bit about where we fit in the,
good. Well,
Lend-
maybe a
lending tree.
little more success will get more people
yeah.
interested in seeing
Yeah.
it work. So-
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I imagine if this is successful, we would have some publicity, we'd want to get out there to let folks know that money's in use and, you know, everybody goes to good times, so
Yeah,
I'm sure they'll be
right.
happy that continues. Or not everybody, but a lot.
So if we wanted, we'd make a motion to approve the application for the loan fund presented.
I will make that motion to approve the revolving loan fund application as presented.
Is that okay with you, Val?
Yeah, do we want to name the borrower or no?
TC
Sure.
Hospitality.
TC Hospitality, right. All right, and we got a second? Any more discussion, questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that motion
Well,
passed.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
for your
thank
time
you.
tonight.
Thank you guys for your work.
Appreciate your hard work on this.
Very exciting.
Yay!
Just side note, I
Right.
opened the Trush and Fingers, bring some of that goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, this is great.
Congratulations, Travis.
I just want to say that the person who will be receiving one is sitting right back here.
Yeah, okay. Great.
You might want to introduce yourself, you're the person, here's the guy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Travis.
Travis. That's not-
Thanks, Travis. Yeah.
There we
Yes,
go.
thank you. Most of you probably know my stepfather, Steve Obie, who's been around forever. So for me, this is coming back. I moved away for some years, kind of get my experience outside of Vermont, and we moved back to be closer, and this is something my wife and I have actually wanted to do, is start our own business. And Chris and Tracy I've known for a while, since high school, so this is one of those things where it's kind of a full circle for my wife and I and my kids to come back here, so.
Great.
I appreciate it, and
Yeah.
thank you very much. And
Congratulations.
Yeah,
you guys will see me
congratulations.
in there, flowered up every day, so.
All right.
All right. So next item is really just a discussion within the select board about the future ambulance service. Sort of a recap, I think, of where we are. I want to thank Renee and Marilee for putting together this, I thought was well-written, and I would categorize it as we put together a committee, you know, and Aaron was part of it, to gather all this information, and now we pretty much have it in front of us, so that's a good thing. Did you want to say anything more about it? Or if there,
If you haven't taken the time to read the summary, I just encourage you to do so. And let us know if you have questions, because I think, I mean, depending on what you guys want to do tonight, if this ends up on the agenda for the next meeting on the 16th, if you have questions, we'd like to get those answers for you ahead of that meeting. So this is the time to ask questions, look for, is there further information that's needed, and to get into any other details.
And I want to add to Phil's giving Renee gratitude, because as was in the minutes last time, I was frustrated that we weren't really moving forward, and I feel like Renee really picked the ball up. And because this is all explained on the first page, the history of how we got to where we are. Out-of-state consultants, which was the original idea, were too expensive, so Renee had the idea of talking to the local people who have the ambulance services. So I think I was at all of those meetings where we met with Al and Essex Rescue and Williston and South Burlington and the former Leslie Lindquist, who used to be head of St. Mike's. They were all extremely helpful. And then Renee followed up with each of them individually through email or through an individual meeting. Do you have feedback?
Yeah.
And then we also had a follow-up meeting with Zeke where he went over more details. So the two of us put together this summary, and you'll see, I think it's on the first page, it might be the beginning of the second. Basically, we narrowed it down to 3 options. So I don't remember what order they're in, because
And they're not in any particular order. They're
Right,
not.
so one option would be to have an outside service. And through research and looking at the different services, the only viable option is Richmond and Charlotte. And Richmond has actually put forward a proposal. Al put together this incredible blue folder, and Richmond's information is in there. And Richmond recommended that they would take the side of Hinesburg that's closest
Yeah.
to them, which is the eastern side, and Charlotte would take the western side. So that's one option. And then another option is to have Hinesburg have its own municipal service. And we really looked into that thoroughly because that is kind of a risk. What happens if we're not ready? And the third option was a mix of the two, right?
A regionalization is what.
Oh, but that's
yeah.
not really an option at
It's
this
not
point.
something that's, it is an option currently in Chittenden County. It's something that, they may be looking towards in the future, but
Right.
we're more in the 10-year
Exactly.
down the road
Down the road, yeah.
or further.
So then we looked at the pros and cons of each of those options. And this is really, the ambulance committee had pretty much come to this, but this was kind of validated by talking to these local experts. So talking to each of them, because they really emphasized there are benefits and detriments to each option. So we listed those. And I don't know if you want to go over those today or if you want to go into it in more detail later, but to me, that's really the important thing to look at. There are benefits to going with Richmond or going with Charlotte, and there are benefits to having our own ambulance service. And then we get to the kind of where the pedal hits the metal, that on July 1st, 2020, St. Mike's is going to stop their service. What are we going to do then? That's why I'm really anxious that we make some kind of a decision. And if we can't possibly, if we decided tonight, yes, we want Hinesburg to have its own ambulance service, we could not be ready by then. For one reason, the major reason is it takes 18 months once you order the ambulance for it to be all outfitted. That's the word I'm looking for, thank you. And the other reason is there's work that our department needs to do to get up to speed. Now, as a subtext to that, St. Mike's has generously offered to mentor our volunteers and to have them ride on the ambulance from Hinesburg to the hospital and go over the forms that need to be filled out, because this is the step that they have not done. They know how to do first response, but when the ambulance gets there, their job has been done. So they need to learn how to ride on the ambulance, go to the hospital, fill out the forms.
second half of the process.
Right, and that can be pretty complex. It's easy to make errors, apparently, in filling out those forms. You really have to cross your T's and dot your I's and fill out everything.
So they do the patient care report, which is what is done today. The biggest piece, like Marilee said, is what happens from Hinesburg to the hospital. So it's that the transport in the ambulance, the ongoing communication with the hospital, taking assessments of the patient and taking vitals and reassessing and taking vitals and communicating that with the doctor. And so those are the pieces that St. Mike's is offering to do as sort of a mentoring shadowing program for all of the volunteers, which is extremely valuable.
So I kind of like to have it in my head in an outline form, and I kind of got ahead of myself. There are these options of having the outside service of Richmond and Charlotte, and then
Similar to what we've already had, although St. Mike's did it for free.
exactly.
So now if we ask Richmond or Charlotte or either one of them, they could do the same thing, but not for free this
Right,
time.
yes.
Right. So St. Mike's, while they didn't charge us, they would be billing the insurance, and so they would get reimbursed by the portion of the insurance. If we were to pay Richmond or Charlotte, we would pay them a fixed rate then they would also bill the insurance, and then they would
Right.
take in that revenue.
Yeah.
We wouldn't realize any of the revenue.
Right.
And if we were to have our own, we would have a billing, we would hire a billing service to take care of that paperwork. We would receive that revenue to us to help offset the cost.
Yes.
But no matter what we do moving forward, we can expect it's going to cost us a little bit.
Yes.
Either way.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Either way, thank you, it's gonna cost. And that's a whole consideration. And it looks like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Renee, it looks like contracting with Richmond or Charlotte would cost less for various reasons. But that's when we're looking at the benefits and the detriments, so that might be a plus. But the detriment is we've got unbeatable response time if we have it right here in the center
Well,
of town.
yeah.
And there are lots of other pluses to have it right
Right.
here
I
in
mean,
the
I
center of
think
town.
one option is we could do nothing and then just be on call, and we have mutual aid, so an ambulance would come, but we would be at the bottom of the list when they actually show.
Right, and not only that, but everybody kind of hates us then, because
Yeah, we're not supporting.
we're in a mooching situation.
Yeah, right.
Where we're not, the idea of mutual aid is it's mutual,
Yeah.
and you reciprocate, and we would just be taking, we wouldn't be
Right.
able to do any giving.
Agreed.
So everybody thought that if it's going to be a few months, and that is an option that is listed here, if it's just going to be a few months, because maybe St. Mike's will extend, and maybe we've leased an ambulance, and maybe we're just about ready, and it'll be maybe 2 months before we're up and running, that would be fine. But if it's going to be a year, it's not really ethical.
Yep, I'd agree with that. And I had a brief discussion with Chief Barber, and no matter, which direction we go forward, whether we look to do our own ambulance, hire it out, do nothing, this year's budget is going to include some additional funds for what looks like a daytime person. Because today, the first response folks right here, forget the ambulance, right here are having a hard time doing daytime response. They have a lot of volunteers, but they're primarily outside of the town. So that's being developed, and I expect coming from the budget, that'll be in the budget.
Right, I think Al's
Or
already
the
put in a
budget
request.
presented here, so that it's being
Right.
looked at.
Dave
what it would
Esty
take.
has been handling that single-handedly for the past several months,
Right.
because if people, in the old days, when people had jobs in Hinesburg, the employers would let them off if there was a call, but most people, like you say, are working outside of town, and it's just not possible during working hours for them to respond, and Dave is just feeling like he can't handle that on his own anymore.
So that, I think we'll see this year.
But if we do go for our own ambulance service, that is a necessity. Al's idea is to start with one full-time employee and one per diem employee. So essentially, we'd always have 2 people, and then the expectation is that the service would grow. It's not necessarily positive in a certain way. That means more people needing ambulance to go to the hospital, but that's the projection. That's what it's looking like. And if that happened, we'd get more revenue from an insurance reimbursements, and then we'd hire 3 full-time people, which is the ideal, to have 3 full-time people.
Several years, not next
Yeah,
year.
oh,
but a little ways
absolutely.
away.
And each of the
Absolutely.
ambulance services that we talked about, whether they were private or municipal, they don't recoup 100% of those. So usually there's a percentage, I think 60 to 70% is what I heard from a lot of folks, sometimes a little more. So the billing service is responsible for, doing that piece. The town would need to decide, or the ambulance service decide how they want to, if they really want to go after the people for that money, or if they decide that's you know, that's something we're gonna do for the residents. They'll get what they can from the insurance and then write off a portion of that afterwards. So I think 60 to 70% reimbursement seems to be
What it
what
ends
we,
up being.
what we end.
But I want to go back to something you said, that in my opinion, doing nothing is not an option. We have to make a decision. St. Mike's has been very proactive in telling us, and Al has been talking about this since I started
Yeah.
being a select board member,
Yeah.
so it's not a surprise. He's been very proactive in
Yeah.
letting us know about this. And we had the ambulance committee, and then Renee's done all this work talking to the local experts, and we've got this packet, and I really think we need to make some kind of a decision.
Yeah, I guess I'm not saying that it's an option. It always is an option. It isn't the option I'd be looking at either, so. And I think it's fair to say the fire department rescue, which is all one. In fact, now it's more rescue than fire.
Yeah.
That's happened over the last 10 or 15 years, really. You know, they really have our best intentions. This isn't, you know, for their better good. It really is for our, for the town's well-being. And they're, you know, like you say, for the last 2 or 3 years, saying, hey, this is coming, this is what we think the future looks like. I think it's fair to say probably Al and his team have been saying it for 5 years now. Hey, here's what we see in the future. Look at the call volume going up. And as we expand and there's more development, particularly maybe a lot more senior housing,
Right.
that call volume will continue to go up. So it's
Right. So there are lots of details in here, and I really encourage everybody to take a look at it before our next meeting. But one thing that I want to say is that right now on the first response team, we have a lot of people who are at the level of EMR, which is at the lowest level, and then we have some that are EMS. And when we hire this full-time person, I think Al's working on a job description, but, you know, nothing's going to happen until we make a decision. It's going to be advanced EMT. The highest level is paramedics, and what people have told us is paramedics are really scarce in Vermont, and even if we hire one, we're not likely to retain them because they're going to go someplace else where they're going to get a better pay. So if we aim for an AEMT, that would be what our license is for the ambulance. And that person would be in charge of training and all kinds of administrative work, but training the volunteers, and some others would come up to that level as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, there is something to be said with, you know, having someone responsible for that. Right now, it's basically all volunteers.
Yes,
And,
yeah.
and I would guess the amount of training for fire and medical rescue equals or maybe exceeds what the police department's required to get trained for. And, you know, it's at least as complicated, and they're all volunteers.
Right, and
So-
it's not easily available from what I understood, so hopefully that will change.
So I'm going to chime in with some
Go ahead, yeah.
concerns. I've been reading all over the place through emails, news articles, how ambulance services are failing. There's not enough volunteers to maintain it. And when we found out that St. Mike's is no longer going to service us, I looked at it as an opportunity for small towns like ours in Richmond and Bristol and Moncton to team up, to do things differently than they're being done right now. It's easy to, even if you're getting on a new service, it's still easy to follow that same old playbook. I really think we need to do something differently, because I see this thing not for lack of ability or lack of know-how, but just lack of people and lack of, you know, just the economy of scale. If you have a central hub with maybe 3 ambulances, but everybody's being managed by a certain number of people, rather than a management over here, management over there, management in Hinesburg, Charlotte, everywhere else, it just seems to make sense to me because we're all small towns. And it just seems like there's an economy of scale that would work. And I was reading in one of the numbers we have here tonight, how it's worked in, is it Bennington or Brattleboro? Rutland. I really, really think that's the way we need to be approaching this. I just do not think it's sustainable for all these small towns like us to have their own ambulance. It's just not efficient.
So we did look into that, and
Tell us. Yeah.
that was a point that was brought up more than once, and you described it well. And Will Moran was talking about economies of scale. I think it was when he worked out in Wisconsin where they really were able to do that. So Hinesburg is kind of on the edge of that necessity for economies of scale. Vermont Digger just had an article that I read this morning about population changes in Vermont. You know, the population is not growing in Vermont, but it's changing. Everybody's moving to Chittenden County. And Hinesburg was in pink. Our population has been growing, not by that much, but it's kind of primed that it's going to be growing because Chittenden County is where the jobs are. So I think we're going to be less in that realm of the small rural town that doesn't have the population to support an ambulance service as time goes on. So the other aspect of this, Tom, that somebody explained to me, and I don't remember who, is the regional idea is an idea that everybody that I've talked to is totally in support of for the reasons that you said. But what needs to be in place is a regional municipality, a regional structure, a regional government, a county government, and we don't have that. The only thing that's regional right now is the sheriff. So that needs to be developed. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but I think that will happen in the future.
So the regional model that you referenced, from what I understand, is a private for-profit ambulance service.
So you could say Essex has that. Essex Rescue services many different towns.
Is that accurate?
I think it's a nonprofit.
It's a private.
Private.
A private nonprofit.
Yeah.
Right, and I think there's a big distinction between private ambulances services for profit and nonprofit, and how that works.
And what I did observe, especially when we had the meeting of all the different representatives, so there was folks that we invited from municipal-based ambulance, fire, rescue ambulance services, as well as private. And there seemed to be, as I sat there and listened to everyone, there seemed to be quite a difference between the perspective of a private-based ambulance service and a municipal. And what I ultimately gathered from that is a municipal ambulance service already has certain structures in place from their municipality that a private service has to form all of those structures in order to get started and set up. Whereas a municipality like Hinesburg we already have an HR, we have personnel policies, we have some of those pieces that are already there. And so I think that, reviewing some of the ambulance committee notes and some of those pieces, that might explain some of the different perspectives.
Right, and along those lines, people said, I think in the end everybody said, Ken Morton was the first one who said it, that it's possible. It's not like the next step. It's like a step up. It's another level. It's going to the next level for Hinesburg to go from the EMS that we now have to have its own ambulance service. But he said it's not a quantum leap. It will be. It's possible to do it. It's just going to take focused effort.
So, just so I have it, because I'm reading your document and I'm reading like what the state says you need and all that kind of good stuff. So is the thought that I see here that we're going to hire some folks who need to be both AEMT level and have firefighting certification. So is the thought that this is just going to fall under the fire department? Is it going to be a separate entity? How do we, or have we not gotten to that place? I see the synergies, but I also see there's a difference between firefighting and medical response, right? So how does that organization look, or we've not gotten there yet?
So there are different models out there. And there are the fire and the mix of the two. So
Yeah.
Williston is an example of that.
Okay.
And
South Burlington also, right?
in South Burlington, is that, yeah. So I think a lot of the municipalities
Okay.
are. And so that would, and that's the model that I think our department is looking.
Okay.
Towards.
And the training levels you need, we think that's manageable. Like, it looks like we're going to hire some folks. So is the assumption we're going to hire some of these folks and they're going to help bring everybody forward? Or are we saying we've already got, I see we've got four EMTs
Two
and two
AEMTs.
AEMTs.
Yep.
And I know you need to have so many of this certification and so many of that to
Yeah.
drive an ambulance and all that. So we're okay with whatever it takes to keep that training going and
Right.
from a volunteer
So that
basis?
would,
or,
right now,
you know?
that falls on the shoulders of the volunteers.
Okay,
So this would be within the job description of whoever we would hire if we were to go down this path. So if it's, that first full-time staff member, I mentioned that some of the pieces that would be included in that job description for all aspects of legal compliance, including ensuring minimum training standards are met, as well as minimum standards for transport vehicles, including vehicle inspections and registration, as well as completing the annual service license application. This person or persons will also be in charge of the scheduling personnel for shift coverage and the community outreach.
okay.
So that there's the benefit of them also having the fire training too, because then they can also support during the day.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think the key piece is if somebody is here hired during the day, they could, handle both.
they're not going to be just sitting there waiting for a
Right.
call. There's plenty of things that they can be doing, and further, community outreach that can be happening too.
And Al also felt, and others confirmed, that if we do have an ambulance, it will attract people who have advanced training. They'll want to be part of that.
Has any outreach been done to other communities? I mean, because I know, just from what I'm reading, that other communities are struggling to support these services. How much outreach has been done to approach them and say, we need coverage, would you like to team up? I mean, we have kind of an ace in a hole because the actual machine, the bus, is paid for. That's a 100% guarantee. So that's something we have right out of the gate to offer other communities who might want to join forces.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely will be, talks with other communities. St. George is already one that we take on for fire and police. But, there's perhaps some other towns too, and more coordination with the mutual aid. So we would have something to offer now in the mutual aid, whereas we were on the receiving end for, ambulance service.
I'm not talking just mutual aid though.
Right.
Because mutual aid is,
Mutual aid is sort of a regionalization model, though.
well, it
Yeah,
is, but
different.
it's still different than what I'm
capacity.
talking about.
Yep.
And when you
Absolutely.
think about our surrounding towns, it was interesting to me, because I totally had your idea, the same idea, and why aren't we doing this? Well, Shelburne definitely is not interested in partnering with us. Their load is filled. They have all they can handle. Same with Williston, same with UVM. So the only ones who have an ambulance who are interested are Richmond and Charlotte. And Richmond has really sent us a proposal and communicated with us a lot. Charlotte, not so much.
Well, I think Charlotte sent out some questions and
They did.
that need to be, so there's further information that we can
Exactly.
gather from them.
Yeah.
I saw some Moncton and Starksboro have come to my mind, just because of
Yes.
location.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think there
absolutely.
have
So
been
I think
discussions
we
with
would
them.
Yeah, well,
definitely
that's
reach
good.
out to
Yeah.
them and
And it would be a
hopefully
model
include them.
similar to Richmond saying, hey, we could provide coverage for this portion of your town. Or
Exactly.
your whole town, and here's how much it will cost.
Exactly, and Richmond already covers Huntington and parts of Starksboro and other adjoining towns.
So Keith Roberts has his hand up.
Oh, okay, yeah. Go ahead, Keith.
Can I just ask a question? The Charlotte and the Richmond providers, what is their governance structure? Are they municipal supported or are they private, nonprofit, volunteer organizations?
They're not 100% volunteer.
Not, right,
Okay.
yeah.
So hypothetically, what I'm hearing a distinction between what they have and what might be the proposal is that ours would be a municipal-based service, not dependent on organizing functionality and structure by themselves.
Right.
Yeah, correct.
So more like Williston, I think, would be
Right.
municipal.
Yep.
And I
And
think Shelburne,
Burlington.
and Shelburne too.
And so there have, Al just confirmed, they have spoken with Starksboro and they are interested.
So I hear what Tom's saying, and I get it, but I also want to know, and I've seen the reports about rural failures of their system. I don't know if those are private, if those are municipal, both. Have we looked into that as to why that happens? And if we do get an ambulance service, how we sort of stave that off or put a buffer in? And it may be regionalization, it may be something else, but did we go down that path at all as to the whys they fail? And
Well, I think one reason is call volume. So we're able to get the call volume from St. Mike's of the last however many years. And it's been increasing steadily in Hinesburg. So I think maybe Charlotte has had that problem of a low call volume. I'm not sure, but Hinesburg has got a pretty solid call volume.
yeah, but that number is only like 1 point something a day, isn't it? Okay, so we looked at it and we think we're, I don't want to say urban enough, but we have enough call volume that it hopefully would stave
Can
off
support
that,
it.
you can't even.
We believe it has been growing and it will
Right.
continue to grow.
Right. And then that's assuming a financial model that's a mix of community funds, tax funds, plus
funds,
assumptions
and
of revenue coming
And
back
then
for
revenue
rides.
coming back from, insurance.
But
Yeah.
it
Medicare.
is important to look at Roman numeral number 2, costs associated with each option. If we do an outside ambulance service, it would be 70,000 to 100,000.
Right.
And if we do it our own selves, it would be 120 to 175. So it's going to be a cost on the tax bill. The taxpayers are going to have to pay something. This is not
Sure,
going to be
yeah.
free, and it's not going to break even.
Yeah, and I think if we go into this, we go into it eyes open that
Exactly.
this is not going to be a pay for itself model. It's not going to be a profit. It's going to be
And
a service
these,
that's paid
these
for.
are rough estimates. The revenue the figure that we used to offset that again was data from St. Mike's for the last 3 years. They feel with the trend that, we're likely to see more revenue coming in, but you want to underestimate rather than overestimate revenue.
Yeah, sure.
One other question you had about why those ambulance services failed.
Yeah.
A lot of them that I've read about and from my understanding are in more rural areas. And also, they didn't have those structures in place ahead of time. They relied entirely on volunteers, I think in most cases. And so some of those pieces are, led to the demise of that. Obviously, this is a risk in any way, and it has to be managed well. But in talking to the different providers, and especially the municipal-based providers, it's not a quantum leap. It's a jump, but it's very doable, and they really felt like that this is something that if we decide to march down this path, there is support in place, and they felt like that we could do this. So
But this is one option, and
it's absolutely one option.
And the other viable option is contracting with Richmond and Charlotte for the future.
And that may be a temporary, we may
It
have
may
to do
be
that.
temporary, we
Sounds
may
like
have
we
to
will
do
need
that.
a temporary solution or temporary, more
Definitely
permanent
need.
solution at some point.
It may be,
Yeah.
that's gone into in
so-
number 3.
I'll say a couple of things here. I'm not fixed on any one solution at this point. And this is a great summary, and I think what we want to do is kick it around a little bit. I mean, are these numbers good? Get some input on it. So there'll be some discussion, some public meeting to get some input, and so we can feel like, okay, we've got a good understanding of the pluses, the minuses, the expected costs, and all that. So while I may not be, saying, here's what I think we should do, I'll say one thing we need to do is make a decision. And that decision could be, we could put this on the town ballot in March, potentially. I'm not, and to say, look, here's an option for the town, here's what we think the cost will be, this is the benefits, these are the, pluses and minuses. If it doesn't pass, here's what we'll end up having to do. And have really strong discussion and, let the people in the town make that decision. That's an option we have. And, it's similar to how we got a police department and the way it operates today. It really ended up being people who, I think, decided in the end they like to have a police department and they're willing to pay the average person or the majority of the people. And it may be people are willing to pay 3 cents on, their tax rate to know they have an ambulance that's gonna not take 15 minutes or 20, it's gonna take 10.
Right,
Or
or
5
less.
or 10.
Yeah.
I don't know, but,
So one thing we should be clear about is the decisions we make will have consequences. So if we wait until March, that will mean that we wouldn't have an ambulance up and running until
Right.
until about a year after St. Mike's ends. So we would have to contract with Richmond and Charlotte for a year or more. If we felt that we could make a decision to maybe start things going, I don't know how we can do anything other than yes or no, but maybe there's kind of a maybe. We can't really start with a maybe, I don't think.
Start what with maybe?
Start the ambulance process. Start asking the volunteers to start training and mentoring with St. Mike's. Ask the ambulance factory, whatever, to start furbishing up the ambulance that we're gonna buy. We can't do that and then at town meeting in March. We can't say do that in November and then at March say, oh, no, we changed our mind, sorry. You don't need to do that training, we're canceling the ambulance.
And talking to both the Williston Fire Chief and the Williston Town Manager, this was something that took Williston a long time before they were ready to make that leap, and people were sort of all over the place. And ultimately, what sort of turned the corner is people decided this was what they wanted to invest in their community, and to have that short response time was important to the community. None of these ambulance services are a profitable thing. It's an investment in the community. You're not going to realize the cost. You're not going to get all of those costs back. But you are going, if you have your own service, you have a more control, and you have that, whereas the focus is your community, and you have another one to provide, service to another community. But
Do you think you need to hire additional staff in town hall to support an ambulance service?
that is,
Like in billing and HR, basically.
right, the billing service is done as an outside entity, and that was
The bulk of it. but
by
we'll have
all
to-
cases.
But we'll have to do a fair share of.
So there would
the
be
paperwork
some-
Shuffle to get it there, correct?
There would be some, the paperwork comes from the department. They fill out that patient care report, and then that's sent to once it's all ready to go, then it's sent to the billing service. That billing service codes it, and they bill the insurance, and then work with, if they don't receive the rest of the reimbursement from the patient, they, work with that piece too.
So no additional staff for that task?
The only communication that will be happening, with our, town clerk, treasurer, and the billing service, just to compare, to make sure, okay, did you receive these payments? Or, so there'll be that monthly check-in.
So no additional staff needed, you're thinking?
No additional staff needed for that piece of it.
How about the business of running an ambulance service?
The business of running an ambulance service, the key pieces of it will be happening within the department of their full-time staff. That full-time staff will be an employee of the town, and so they will follow under the same personnel policy that all staff members do. So it would be an additional employee to the town,
Yep.
but
So an incremental
incremental
in
increase.
activity,
Right,
but not a complete,
right.
piece. So
Well,
questions,
I was going
Andrea?
to raise that issue that Aaron did, is that I do think that if you look at the administrative costs, what happens, the volunteers or the EMT, whoever's going to, fills out at the hospital the appropriate forms, there is a lot, I think, that has to happen between that getting to the billing company and and administratively. I mean, I'm sure Renee has probably talked to the town manager, but I think it's also important to look at the size of the staff at Town of Williston, in Shelburne, in Colchester. We have a very, very small town staff, and things kind of happen routinely in those departments, so it may not seem like a lot. I am urging you to be quite cautious in that regard of the administrative tasks that come about when we're doing that, as well as the kind of oversight. When you have a private nonprofit ambulance service, there's a board of directors that is making decisions about the hiring and the staff, and they provide a service to that town. But there's a very clear outline of what that service is, and that the private nonprofit is responsible for all that internal personnel management. I feel like the situation that we have here in Hinesburg is we have a very dedicated fire and an EMT who very dedicated crew there, but it is not necessarily functioning the way that other departments within town function. And I think the oversight that needs to come from the select board and or the town administrator needs to be clearly identified and very much strengthened, so that it's clear what the personnel policies are, how this, but really 3 people. We know that you can't just
Right.
have one person.
Yeah,
So we have a per
right.
diem, but the per diem is a contract. So there's like all these little legal matters that
Right.
seem to me can add up to a lot of headaches. So I would just urge caution and really looking at the differences between how a town of Williston can handle this pretty seamlessly and us.
So I just want to add to that, when we were meeting with Zeke, who is the South Burlington EMS chief. I thought it was South Burlington. Oh, okay. Anyway, I asked him, well, what if we fail? And he gave this quote, organizations fail because systems are not in place, which is just what Andrea was talking about. So if we do decide to have our own service, I think as the select board, we have to be very awake and ask the questions like you've been asking tonight, and make sure that we do have these systems in place, and make sure that it's not just 50% more work for Renee.
If we do decide to march down that path, I think, in talking to the different providers, there have been, some of those folks have offered to sort of be our consultant through that process and to help the town, help the department, developing out any structures that aren't in place currently that would need to.
I think what Andrea's saying is similar to, and I've already done this maybe once or twice to sort of apologize by saying, let's have a committee. They can do this. And I think the committee got together, very competent people, and realized there's a lot there. There's a lot of details. There's a wide range of things and options out there. So it's very complicated. And, you know, the more you talk about it, the more you get into the minutia of each of these things. And I think what Andrea is saying is, you know, what are the details that would happen with just the town government in this? Because it will be a little different. The fire department, I think, is transitioning over into, you know, now that their budget's part of ours and they're sharing their budget, you know, they're transitioning into a full town department. I think 15 years ago, they were sort of on their own. And 20 years ago, they were funding all their stuff by themselves. So that's going to be a transition for them too. And with it comes just more complications, not because they want to be complicated, but there's a lot of detail there. Alex, did you have something you wanted to?
Sure. So 2 questions and then a comment. So some of the towns that we're talking about possibly partnering with have nonprofit ambulance services, so Charlotte and Richmond. Did we talk to their town administrators to ask them if they think that's the best model for them and why they don't have a municipal system?
I did talk to the Richmond town manager. He's relatively new to it, but they are a completely separate entity, and so Richmond pays a certain fee to them as well.
Right.
And they do a subscription service. So if anyone who wants to subscribe, they pay, I think it's a $50.
$50,
Yeah,
per
$50
household for a
per
year.
household. And then they wouldn't, correct me if I'm wrong, Will, I think then when the insurance is billed, they don't have to pay additional. Is that the purpose of the subscription service?
Yeah, that's typically what's.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so I was just curious if they had perspective on whether they liked or didn't like having a nonprofit take care of it instead of the town. I'm guessing most of the responses are just gonna be, oh, it's always been that way, and we're just used to it. But the other question was, have we reached out to the other outer ring Chittenden County communities that don't have ambulance services like Underhill and Jericho, that I think are covered by maybe Cambridge Rescue or something like that?
Essex, I think.
Just to see why they don't have them and what they think about that. I just,
Right.
but that's just a question. Did
Yeah, I
we
think
reach out
the
to them?
ambulance committee, I believe, wasn't there, I'm trying to remember some of the minutes that I read. I know there was some discussion about the Underhill model and what that was. I don't know if anyone recalls.
All Will's deal.
What's
Right,
that?
I think
Yeah.
Essex Rescue covers that.
So does Essex?
Essex covers all of Underhill and most of
Yeah,
Jericho.
yeah.
And the private nonprofit fire department covering those 2 towns has a few employees along the numbers you were discussing.
Okay.
Westford is another community I used to live in and that does not have its own ambulance service and splits the town in half.
Right.
Half Fairfax, half Essex Rescue, so that's just another example.
Yeah.
And then my comment is, it sounds like from what Phil said that, and what Mary Lee said, that we're kind of in a bind for this next year and we kind of have to go with, you know, at least a contract with somebody else temporarily while we're getting our ducks in a row if the community wants to move forward with municipal service. I would encourage us, when we look at the municipal service option, to factor in the long-term capital costs. The summary talks
Right.
about the potential need to have a new facility. And I think the fire department's been exceedingly clear
Yes.
for many years that they need a better facility just for their fire needs, not, you know, forget about the ambulance, just to house all their equipment in one building and have it, you know, be up to date, and hopefully someday have this Quint vehicle, this vehicle that can do multiple
ladder
things,
truck.
including have a ladder function. And so I'm a little concerned that we're not, that we haven't baked that into the pros and cons and the real differences. Because
Yeah.
I think it would be good to say, in year 2, these are the financial differences and pros and cons. In year 10, these are the differences, and I think those capital costs could really skew things
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
The complication with that, Alex, is like every step, every place I look, it's more complicated. So as you said, whether we get an ambulance or not, there has got to be a new facility. We actually do not have a ladder truck. That really surprised me. But you look at the Thistle Hill buildings, and Al says, if there's a fire on the top floor of one of those, we can't address it. And somebody has to come from another fire department with a ladder. So we have to get a ladder truck. And we can't fit a ladder truck in the facility we have now. So whether we get an ambulance or not, it's just like we have to hire a full-time person for the day because we don't have the volunteers anymore. So some of the things, it's hard to separate from the ambulance. Whether we get an ambulance or not, we're going to have to do
I'm just
them.
expressing some concern about not seeing those numbers
Right.
further out in time, and also, you know, the department's stance that they can accommodate an ambulance with our current facilities today. I totally trust them to make the informed decision about whether they can do that or not, but I've also heard them over the last decade talk about how the existing facilities are inadequate.
Yeah.
So to think that you could stuff an ambulance inside our current facilities and reutilize the old fire station and make it all just work, I wonder
I think
about that.
they've been open to this, and they've said, we could do it temporarily, but it's
We
not,
would
yeah.
have to have
So
the
I think we
facility.
have to go into this with our eyes wide open, knowing that, you know, I think the fire department has been talking about the need for an additional piece of equipment. And, you know, whether we need it today or not, we could argue one way or the other. You know, if we put in a fairly large building of elderly housing and other things that are potentially in the development phase, certainly it tends to lean a little more toward one direction. So I think that you're right. I think if we say, here are our options, and that's why I say we need to, you know, chew through this great summary and walk away saying, you know, we've critiqued it, we've looked at it, and here is, you know, the impact of these different decisions. And I think part of it is what capital will we need going forward. You know, it's not one ambulance. We'll get one for free, great.
But they only last 8 to 10 years.
Yeah,
so you'd have to put that on the
exactly, exactly.
budget.
So, again, I think it goes, that's why, you know, one option here is to go to our citizens and say, you know, here's the cost, here's the service. They've gotten, you know, used to really good road crew service. There's a high expectation there. They've gotten used to police, you know, right here in town. We could choose not to have any police in town and be covered by state police, but people want that service. And so there's a cost with it. So what service do we want for an ambulance? Again, we've gotten free service, and that's very unusual, and that's not going to continue forever. So even if we hire Richmond, Charlotte, or some other piece, or even a regional, it's now going to start costing us money.
Well, I'm cognizant that when we proposed the public safety building, the combined police and fire station, that bond went down, and then subsequently the police station bond went forward. I think that adding ambulance service could, because it is such a critical need and is very clear and present to everyone who lives in the community, could help push forward a facility expansion in a way that perhaps people weren't willing to consider before. So I'm not trying to poo-poo the idea of municipal service at all, but at the same time, we need to understand the costs. And Planning Commission and I have been advocating recently for us to engage a financial analyst to help us run our long-term capital budgeting sort of finances, and not just the basics, but also do revenue projection of grand list growth, and not on an annual basis, but looking 10 years forward, given all the development that we have in the permitting pipeline. We're going to do that with the wastewater upgrade, you know, thanks to the engineer we have on board. I think we need to do it for this too. It seems like maybe we should spend some money to hire somebody who could do
all of
I
those.
think
do
that's
have
in
a
our next
consult-
agenda item, right? We'll be talking about that.
Yeah,
We have a-
We'll get you,
Yeah,
Maggie, but I'm just cognizant of our timing here, so, and I don't think we're planning to make any decisions. But
Right.
go ahead, Maggie.
No, it just seems way too early to be putting this on up for a vote in the spring. If your numbers are kind of vague, like, well, this may cost in this range and this may cost in this range, and to have the town, folks voting for, that's just way too soon.
Yeah,
It seems like, I don't know what decision is in front of you, but it seems like the immediate decision is to hold off on making a decision until we have some more,
So this,
better, more
the
reliable
purpose of
data.
this meeting tonight was just to provide a summary to the select board of the steps that have taken place to date. There is, in the background, there's one of the consultants that have been working on a budget and working with me to try to formulate a budget. We didn't want to continue that until we have a little more direction from the board and other questions, so.
But I just have to say one thing, what Tom mentioned, Will Moran sat there and talked about, what a regional system could be. And I just remember thinking, Hinesburg, we could be like the spark to having that happen, because it has to happen. And we could be the nexus for a regional conversation that could really change ambulance service in this area. And I personally think that we should think big and make it a big table and invite a lot of people to it.
I agree, 100%.
It could be a regional non-private nonprofit. It doesn't necessarily have to be a government service. Because we
Well,
don't
we
have.
we see that model in other places.
Right, we don't have
So.
a regional governance structure, so, you can.
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Jamie Carroll up in town, I also work as an advanced EMT for Middlebury Regional EMS in Middlebury, Vermont. Will Moran's my brother.
I was gonna say, oh my gosh, I'm looking.
I'm looking at you, you're not.
Oh my gosh.
So I would echo that there is an opportunity here to regionalize. I think Richmond's the right partner to begin that with. They're already a private nonprofit. They're looking for call volume to staff their current truck. I think I was able to skim this document tonight. I think one thing that's missing is an explanation about the different service levels. What does an EMT staff truck deliver? What does an AEMT truck staff deliver? What does a paramedic truck deliver? Richmond and Charlotte are both paramedic services, so some of the time you would be getting a paramedic. I also think this is an important decision for the town, so I would encourage you to bring it before the voters. Maybe it's too soon for March, but it seems doable to me. You could look at other services. Maverick Valley Ambulance Service, where I used to work, has 300 calls a year. You can quickly get their budget. Stuff can be pulled together. Stowe is another municipality. They have a fire department, they have an EMS, there is some overlap, but that might be a good model to look at.
So,
Okay, go ahead.
really good information.
Yeah.
And a lot of good questions, which is why I'm not eager to march down any path until we start getting the answers to the more direct questions we've asked tonight. It's just too big of a decision, and there's too many opportunities, like Maggie just said, that we can develop something that's really different and really good and just more sustainable for communities. Because I just think everybody having their own is just not right. It's just not the right way to go.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. I think, I think people have an expectation of service, though. Everyone has their own fire department because that's how they sort of developed, because it took, if you had a horse and buggy, you couldn't go to the next town to put out a fire. So everybody had their own fire department, and I think, you could have the other argument. I'm not saying one way or another, but, when people say the difference between 10 minutes and 20 minutes, could make a big argument that that's worth it. I don't know. I'm just sort of saying. So, I think regional would be.
It doesn't mean that
No.
they're in one place.
Right.
It means they could be
Yeah.
strategically located.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
the management and the administrative stuff.
That's regional,
What
yeah.
needs,
Okay.
takes a lot.
But to also get, I mean, in the 2017 study, Richmond had the best response time in the town, certainly on the east side. But to get a significant reduce in scene time, the station's gonna have to be manned. So you're gonna have people sitting there at night,
Yeah,
which is a change for the departments.
yeah. All right. Thanks for the discussion. This is good, and I'm glad we're, making some progress and getting more and more information. So, all right. Next item is the official map. So, Alex, are you gonna come up and,
Everybody sign in.
Yes.
Maggie too? Okay, great.
You're here for this too, Maggie, yes?
Can I just ask one question
Yeah.
before we go on to the next one?
Sure. Go ahead.
What is our next steps as a board
Good
for the next
question.
meeting?
Yeah?
I want to know, like, what I need to come prepared for
Regarding the ambulance.
regarding the ambulance service.
So were there specific information that you want gathered before next meeting? Is there specific things that,
I think so. I mean, so we're just getting a chance to digest this. I think maybe it might take more than a couple of weeks to do this, but maybe, we could say either in 2 or 4 weeks from now, what next meeting or the meeting after that, we give you, if that's okay, as much feedback as we can on this and as many questions as we have on this. And then we try to fill this in and get more data, I guess.
So what more data? Because a question came up about the costs, but the costs are kind of fluid because it depends on the call volume. And,
I think there were questions though, a more developed budget.
Yeah,
Just to
I
get a
think
more
more of a
understanding
developed
and
budget.
including the capital
Right,
costs in
yeah,
there as well.
yeah,
Which is
so
something that's
outline-
being worked on right now.
Outline, the capital just for the ambulance, if that's possible.
And for me, I'd like to see the structure and the costs associated with a regional nonprofit.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be the top of my list. How many ambulances are needed to serve a certain population? How many people, I'm a little skeptical of one full-time plus one per diem. I don't know how you man an ambulance 24 hours a day with 2 people.
Well, I
And I
think
don't see-
that was just really the start. I mean, I think in the end,
that's
within 3 or 4 years, at least,
It touches
there'll be
on
3
Alex's
people.
point. I mean, that's
Yep.
just the start, but a start can last no time. And I think to expect the volunteers to all of a sudden want to be here 20 hours a week when they can only make it a few hours now. Not that I'm saying they only make it a few
Right.
hours, just it's the hours of the day that they
Right.
can or can't be here.
right, and to add to that, Tom, people told us that the model that you see around the state is if it starts like Williston with volunteers, all volunteers, and then they get a paid person, then they get 2 paid people, and then the volunteers start to drop off, and pretty soon it's all paid people.
Well, right, and that's,
So I would
But-
look at this eyes wide open.
Yeah.
It's going to be at least 4 paid people, a new building, an
Well,
ambulance,
I mean,
an
yeah,
administrator. I mean, that's my opinion. If you're talking about service level and service coverage, right, and what people are probably going to want to expect, right, it's going to be a house 24/7, bodies in an ambulance ready to roll. Maybe we can't afford that, maybe we can, but it would be good to see what are those price models and what are regionalization or it's tough. I'm now understanding why it's so complex because there's so many different ways you could go about it. So,
Right.
and I think that, different options, like you're talking about, this option up here.
Right.
For 24
Right,
hours,
right.
24, 7 days a week. I don't think.
Money is no
I don't
object.
think that's,
Right.
that's another level of service.
Mhm.
So it really is, what level of service do the people in town want?
If everyone wants 5-minute service, then west side of the town from Richmond, east side of the town from
Maybe.
Surfers Lot. They can, 5 minutes, they'll be
Well, they're not according to
Yeah.
Richmond. Their quickest response time, I think, was 12 minutes.
So we're not gonna solve it right now.
To the west side of town,
Yeah.
but if,
Maggie,
west.
Maggie?
yes, sorry.
So those are the details we won't solve here.
Right.
So I think, what Jeff is saying, we want to get as much data as we can.
Right.
And I think along with it, we say, this is the service level that you get. So we don't have 24/7 now, 5-minute service.
Right.
So, we're lucky to have 20 minutes during the day and then sometimes it's mutual aid. We'll never have that, but I think we had to say, here's what it is. And obviously, the cost increases and it's a curve like that. Go ahead.
I think in the near term, because we know this is gonna take a while to sort out, I think we need to start figuring out who's gonna provide the service in the near
As the
term.
first step.
As of
Yeah.
July 1st.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that
Okay.
was part of the summary of
Right,
the
right.
options
Yeah.
for that.
We have some options. I would really love to have some direction on what to do with the ambulance committee, because it was kind of left dangling at the end of July with the idea that we needed to get outside experts to consult with, and I think Renee has picked up the ball on that and done the best we could with the funds that we have, getting the people who are in charge of local EMS services to come and talk to us. So I feel like the committee has done what it is able to do, and I think it would be nice to have it come to a conclusion
Sure.
instead of be dangling.
So I'll suggest something, and it could be that or something similar to it, is to ask each committee member to take a look at this summary and critique it. I agree, I disagree, what about this, what about that? And we could add that into our, see if we've captured, obviously, people are gonna have different opinions, but have we captured what we think is, are we missing anything? Generally, does it seem to capture what's important?
So in your packet is also I compiled all of the minutes from the ambulance committee, as well as the original Front Porch Forum post, when, asking for people to join that committee. And then I also included the minutes that Marilee took of the meeting with the consultants, or with the other providers as well, in charge for that, so.
Okay.
There's a lot for you to review.
And I was gonna look at that blue book.
Yes.
So,
Did you get it?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I would like to somehow tie the strings up and somehow bring the committee to a conclusion, so it's not hanging there dangling, waiting for the next meeting. So if I sent this out to all the committee members, would that then be the conclusion to that committee? I think that needs to be a select board
Yeah,
decision.
I think so.
I think so.
So we wouldn't actually have to meet again physically. It could just be, this is the final feedback, and thank you very
Right,
much.
and then, potentially moving forward, we might put together another one to continue to do the work. But this, I think if you look at what we asked the committee to do, this is it. And I don't have it in front of me, but it said, what are the options? What's the short-term suggestion? What's the long-term suggestion?
Yeah.
So, while the committee hasn't come and said, here's your answer from all the work, we have some information that we can work with, and we can see the short-term solution options and long-term solution options.
Right, good point. So the committee did set the groundwork for this, and then it just got too complex. But this was the goal of the committee, so.
I think generally, I think it's there.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Does that need to be a vote or anything?
As far as,
As the future work of the committee, if the committee's work is done with giving feedback on this document?
that, you don't have to vote on that, but that can be the direction that you can give them if you're, sending them an email. You can attach that summary
Yeah.
to it and kind of give an explanation of
Yeah,
the
and
steps that we've taken.
you can share the feedback that they have, and maybe,
I
they're
will
not
do
happy
that.
with
I was
where we
asking,
are,
since
or-
the select board voted to create
Right.
the committee, do we need to vote to conclude the committee, or is that just more like an action item?
Yeah, I think it's an action item.
Yeah, you don't need
We've
to,
done that in the past
you don't
For
need
any
to.
other committee.
Right.
Good, thank you.
So again, I went in this with my eyes only half open, assuming, okay, we'll get all the information and we'll be able to make a decision, but, there's a lot to it. And I think the fire department has a lot invested too, so they, were pretty strong on the committee side, but they're anxious to move forward, because we've been slow to pick up the ball and move it forward. And we do have a pending deadline of, all of a sudden, you're not calling an ambulance to come, you're asking for mutual aid.
Right.
And the documents that I included links to at the beginning of that summary are, an example of that the department's been talking about this for a few years and planning for changes in Hinesburg and the increasing call volume. So it's all good information to look at. And I did want to say that I know the department would appreciate for select board members to come to their Wednesday night trainings, their Wednesday night meetings. They're either having a meeting or a training or both every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. So like any of the other departments that I ask you to go to and kind of get an idea of what happens in there, I'd do the same with the fire department. That's it.
Okay. So I guess we'll keep going, Tom, we'll be back in a minute. Do you want to start, Alex?
Sure.
And thank you for the memo, and we have the information in front of me. At first, I was saying, oh, boy, I forget all this. But then as soon as I pulled up the paperwork and the map and the descriptions, it sort of all came back to me. What's always helpful, either, maybe now, would be a brief outline of the steps,
Yep.
which I think are in your memo, or we know them almost by heart now.
Yes, that's the easy part, so let's do the easy part first, process. And Maggie, our planning commission chair, is here
Look important and not so.
to make sure that the importance of all of this is abundantly clear. So the process is that the planning commission worked for a good deal of time to develop these proposed changes. There are two sets of changes. There's a proposed change to our official map, which was first adopted in 2009, has not been revised since, so we're overdue in revising it. This is the proposal to revise it. There's also a proposal to revise our zoning regulations, the village area design standards, to add a new section related to required public green space, open space. So those are two separate proposals, and procedurally, you received this back in June, I think. The process is that you look at it, get your questions answered. You are allowed to make revisions to it as well, and the caveat being that, some types of revisions are perfectly appropriate for a select board to make. Others are so large or perhaps counter to the planning commission's proposal that you really ought to just send it back to them at that point.
Right.
But you can make revisions, and once you're happy with it, assuming you can get happy with it, you schedule a public hearing. And then you take public feedback, and it's only after that that you can take action to adopt. Now, you do have the option of deferring to the voters. We haven't used that option in Hinesburg very much because while you can send this for a townwide vote, voters always have the opportunity to petition if you do this yourselves, which is the way we normally do it, and they're dissatisfied with what you've done and they want a townwide vote. And that has happened before.
I think on the rural zoning,
It did,
that happened
in fact,
that
happen
way.
on the rural
Yep.
Stormwater as well.
Okay.
Yeah, yep. So that's the process, and this was presented to you in July, and so you're in the evaluation phase of it, and the purpose of tonight is for you to have a chance to ask questions and propose revisions, and Maggie and I are here to talk to you about the intent, and I'll take lots of notes on any
Okay.
revisions you want.
So potentially, we might have some small revisions that we could make to get a final version we're happy with.
Yep.
Okay, so my suggestion would be we go right through this, 1 through whatever it is, with, general, unless people have the process questions, but we go right through some of the details that are highlighted on the map, individual items. And I'll start off.
All right.
Just number 2, this potential, intersection here, the Riggs Road intersection. I'm going to pull out my map so I can look at it at the same time. We haven't really done much here, and now with the Bloomstrand property, is that now sort of on hold, any development there?
Yes.
So we did talk about having those developers help work on this solution. So now,
Each of those developers, so the Blumstrom property on the east side and the Haystack Crossing property on the west side, which BlackRock is a developer for, each of them were actively looking at a short-term solution for their particular project. So on the west side, BlackRock was talking about adding a
Turn lane.
right-hand turn
Yeah.
lanes in and out only, no roundabout as of yet, no light as of yet. And for the Blumstrom project, they were talking about a similar turn lane, a left-hand turn lane as well. So they were both willing to be part of a larger solution someday, which could be a roundabout or some other intersection improvement there. But neither of them were actively planning for that for their first phase. And so I think that seemed to be further off and something that all of us were going to have to wrap our heads around at a later date. And that's what the official map is saying, is that someday this is likely to happen. It's likely to be bigger than just 2 projects trying to get in
Right.
a first phase, and we ought to make sure that any development that happens around that intersection accommodates
Properly
what could
developed.
be a future,
Yep.
a larger intersection.
yeah,
But isn't that basically state V-Trans property anyway?
Not if we take over 160.
Well, V-Trans right now owns 116 and makes the decisions about it. They don't own or dictate what happens on private property outside of the right-of-way. And so because we know something is likely to happen here in the future, we've worked with both BlackRock and Blumstrom before they pulled their project, and they're both happy to accommodate that, to basically allow what might be a larger intersection slop outside of the right-of-way and not put buildings there, which would get in the way of a future intersection improvement. So that's the value, even with V-Trans as the primary decision maker, Tom, is that it allows us to work with private landowners and give them a heads up that.
and by identifying it on our map, when we talk to V-Trans, if that's who we need to work through, that's helpful too. To
Oh,
say
absolutely.
we've
This
worked
shows
on
the town's intention and the fact that we're planning for this growth that we're anticipating, and V-Trans is, wants to be at the table. The
Yeah.
Regional Planning Commission wants to help us, study this. There's lots of transportation planning funds, so.
Yeah,
The most important thing is enlarging the right-of-way. I mean, you can't have an intersection improvement
Right.
unless you get a bigger right-of-way.
okay. I have more questions, but anybody have anything on the first page in particular?
The first page is largely intersection
Yeah,
improvements.
so I noticed there's a few here that are tied to the Hannaford project, if that was to move forward, potential, some crosswalks and things like that, they're kind of hanging on that if that moves forward. And then number 6, I think this is the first time I guess it's been here all along, but I hadn't recognized it before. Potential 4-way stop there at Commerce Street and Mechanicsville Road, which I think is an interesting,
Yes.
a
I
good
think
concept
that
potentially.
The planning commission received some feedback about what's happening there currently and the safety of residents who
Yeah.
live especially in the Thistle Hill neighborhood,
Yeah.
trying to come across that road, and there's no stop, it's not a stop-controlled intersection for
Right.
traffic on Mechanicsville Road, so it's not to say that it will happen. You will decide that. It's a town, road right-of-way, but the thought was that it could happen.
Yep.
We ought to plan for it. It's not clear to me that there's going to be a development that would get in the way of that. So part of the purpose of official map is to put landowners, give them some notice that we might need to be able to do something on their property. in the future. This is probably not one of those examples. This is more of a, let's just get everybody to understand that this is what we're thinking about more than a future public facility that requires private property.
Yeah.
You should
Andrew?
correct that, though, because the sidewalk is on the other side of the road. At Mechanicsville and Commerce Street, there's the sidewalk on Commerce Street is on the south side of Commerce Street.
Oh,
There's one on,
Showing it
yeah, I
on
see
the
what you're
north.
saying.
There-
Not
There's one
to
on,
the bridge.
to go
Oh, I
across
see
the
what you're
bridge,
saying.
there's
To
only
go
one,
across the bridge,
yeah.
it's on, well, it would be my left, it's on the south side.
Yeah,
you're right, Andrea, that's
Yeah.
a good catch.
And I would also, if we're talking about intersections, the Mechanicsville Road intersection, it's not only
on 116.
on 116, Mechanicsville Road and 116, it's not only a crosswalk, but there really has to be something done to reduce the speed at which people make that corner. You know, so all these bump outs and everything, if you've seen what's happening in Burlington, it's a redesign of that intersection. This is really what I would like to see the verbiage in there.
You mean people heading north and turning right?
Yes.
I got
They
in an
whip around
accident.
that
I got in an
corner.
accident there.
Really?
I was in the old police station parking lot,
Wow.
and somebody looked to the left and just went around and clipped me, so.
So Andrew, you're suggesting to modify the language in the descriptions under number 3 to recognize intersection redesign, not just an enhanced crosswalk?
Yeah, and you know, especially if there's gonna need to be signage for when the road is closed and,
Yeah,
I mean,
if that-
it needs to be a redesign, not just sticking up signs and painting
Potentially
crosswalks.
straightened it out rather
Straighten
than
it,
being
you
an
know,
angle.
making it be a intersection that you
Yeah.
have to do at, you know, light. It'd be
I-
nice if the people did it at 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I would be okay with just, adding a little more detail there like that. If
Okay.
that's all right with the board. So any more questions on page 1? Page 2. These are some road extensions, part of the Black Rock development, part of getting across Patrick Brook on the west side of 116.
There are an awful lot of numbers here. The planning commission was interested in seeing each of the segments broken out with somewhat different descriptions. That's why it's not just one number for, that entire new stretch of future road.
Yeah, and that's how it will be developed too, I mean, right? It would be developed in pieces, more than likely.
Absolutely, yeah. Just so we're clear for the viewing audience, much of what's on this new official map reflects the conversations that we've been having with these larger developments that have been proposed. So we're trying to do two things at once. We're trying to update the official map to reflect the reality of what's likely to happen on the ground in these private developments, while also making clear what the town's interests are and making sure that those are respected as we go forward. So we're getting good feedback in both directions, and it's certainly on the road infrastructure. I think we're very much synced up with these development proposals.
And the roadway to the Bissonnet, which really isn't shown on here. That would be, there's no development, there'll be development around there, but there'll be a piece that the town would be responsible, or what's
So that's-
there now
that's
gets
number
integrated.
That's number 13. The assumption is that the current roadway to the rec area would be effectively torn up or
Yeah.
taken up by development, and that the permanent access, once BlackRock develops the property, would be number 13.
Okay.
And I think that's consistent with their phase 1
B?
project that they brought to you for allocation.
Okay.
Now, the future of that northern portion, which is on the map is around number 11, is still unclear. You know, in their master plan, they show houses where we currently have the road, and so that's why we don't show a future public road there. That might change, and hopefully we can update the official map in, you know, closer to real time than we have recently.
Okay.
I would say that the idea of the bridge across Patrick Brook, it's not likely, it will
Yeah.
be bigger.
What, on 116?
The one on 116 and the one that has to cross where number 14 says.
There was a description of that there,
Yeah.
about it being bigger
I mean, the
than
one
what's
up the-
existing.
The existing one's too small. So with all that additional stormwater, the one that where number 14 says, it will be bigger.
Yes.
Andrea's-
It doesn't say how
Andrea's
big.
quibbling with the words
Yeah.
likely a bit larger, instead of just saying it will be larger.
Well, what will determine the size of that in the end?
Well, actually, the developer, Brett Grabowski, for his Hinesburg Center 1 and 2 project, hired a hydrogeologist, or help me, Andrea.
A hydrogeologist.
Hydrogeologist. Yeah, to identify what the likely improvement should be, and it was that group that said the existing 116 box culvert is undersized, and that
Okay,
if
yep.
if there's going to be an additional crossing to the west of 116, it should be of a certain dimension, which is larger than the one under 116.
Okay.
So they've done that. They've done that work. We know the approximate size of the box culvert, and that's why it says likely a bit larger. Because right now, if a larger one were put in, 116 the culvert on 116
limited.
would still be the limiting factor. But
Yeah.
that culvert's not going to last forever. So I think Andrea's point is let's size the one downstream properly, so when the one upstream gets replaced, everything works.
That was identified quite a long time ago by the Regional Planning Commission, one on 116, and V-Trans as being undersized and was one of the limitations on the Hannaford development.
But V-Trans did make a conscious decision not to replace it when they repaved 116.
Right, because it's still
Because it's
functioning.
within its lifespan,
Yeah.
and they're not going to invest in that. Anyway,
And in that area, the developer of the pharmacy, I'm sorry, the name.
yes, Brett
Yeah,
Grabowski.
now, does he have to provide a crossing?
Correct. So as a
a pedestrian crossing?
pedestrian crossing across Patrick Brook on the west side of 116. So we are building
Oh,
one
just
on
to the
on
west.
east
Okay,
side,
yes.
and he's responsible for
Yeah,
getting
okay.
across the Patrick Brook to connect with our new trail that
Yeah.
heads out to the rec fields. And we just recently worked on a time horizon for him to deliver, deliver on that.
That's
Where is that crossing in relation to? where it
So
says
on this
14
map, yes,
Right here.
Renee is pointing to it right there.
just to the, yeah.
Just north of Kinney Drugs. So
Along
imagine the
116.
sidewalk that ends at the north side of Kinney Drugs continuing about 100,
Oh, yeah.
150 feet
Okay, thank
across
you.
the brook.
Who's responsible for number 14, the crossing there?
That will be the two developers, both Brett Grabowski for the second phase of Hinesburg Center project west of Kinney Drugs, and the BlackRock developer of Haystack Crossing. Whether that's not an inexpensive piece of infrastructure, and they both understand that. So whether they come back to us or we work with them proactively to establish some sort of impact fee structure so that they could pay for it and potentially get reimbursed, which impact fees allow for, remains to be seen. But they are in control of pretty much all the land that's being developed on either side, so it makes sense for them to take the lead on that.
But they could theoretically just stop.
No.
On either
Well,
side of the
that's
river,
a-
or is this requiring that?
That's a
bridge has to
question.
get-
That's a question for the development review board process, and I think my office has made it very clear to both developers that that's not an option to just stop and not have a connection there. But ultimately, that's a function of the DRB review. since both of those projects want to move forward with a phase of the project that's in the vicinity, I'm optimistic that there won't be too much arm twisting to make that happen, but we'll see. BlackRock's proposal is much closer to that because the senior housing element is sort of on that corner. And Brett Grabowski's project, his first phase is really closer to Farmall Drive, and so he has less sort of incentive to make that box culvert connection happen. So we'll just have to see how that happens through the DRB process.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Andrea?
I would also suggest, not just for this, but that it would be really good to show the extent of the floodplain in these areas, on this map, and recognize what the long-term impacts will be to the town for development within the floodplain, whether it's our own infrastructure or private landowners. And if you don't want to go as far as showing the floodplain, at least show the fluvial erosion hazard, or whatever it's called these days, in there, and have our eyes wide open about what this official map shows and what this development shows in terms of flooding and impacts.
I'd be happy to send that around or send it
What
to
it would
Renee so
look
she
like?
can distribute it to the board. I wouldn't recommend adding it to this
No,
map as it's
right.
already a busy map, but I think Andrea's point is a good one, and the eyes wide open is important. Specifically where number 14 is that Jeff was just asking about. That's obviously crossing Patrick
Yeah.
Brook. It's crossing the flood hazard area, both the fluvial erosion hazard area and the FEMA mapped hazard area. And segments of that connection road are also within it. So we're talking about a future public road that the town would take
Right.
over and be responsible for maintaining, that is in the floodplain and crosses the floodplain. So we have to be pretty cognizant of that.
But would that belong on this map? I mean, that piece, this map isn't trying to identify all the hazards.
No, but that's a pretty important one. So I'm happy to show you an overlay, just so you can
Okay,
have it in
yeah.
your mind, even if it's maybe not on the map that gets
I
formally
mean,
adopted.
so I think what I heard you say is, when this begins to be developed, that crossing, then the DRB has all that data to decide whether, the structure being put in there is safe and long-lasting, let's
Yep.
say, and doesn't create additional hazards or flooding issues somewhere else. That would be a good map to look at, because that area in particular is quite challenging. Well, a lot of areas are, I guess.
Yeah,
All right.
largely the bulk of the gray area between 14 and 15 is in the flood hazard
Yes.
area. So what Brett Grabowski is looking to develop next is largely within the flood hazard area. And so Phil's being proposed and analysis of impacts is being done. The flood hazard area does not extend too much north of number 14. So most of what BlackRock is proposing and most of the infrastructure that you see on the official map for public infrastructure is outside of the flood hazard area. But that area between 14 and 15, Andrea's right. We should be going into this eyes wide open that if those public roads and sidewalks and trails are all going to be
Challenge.
Yep, built in a flood hazard area and elevated to be up and out of it.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure we keep moving forward here. So page 2, no more questions. Any on page 3? This begins to talk about small parks. Again, more roads.
And it,
You know, we have-
begins the conversation about these parks, these
Yeah.
future community facilities, which I think would be fair to say the planning commission spent an awful lot of time on, particularly with regard to number 34, which is not on this page,
Yes,
but you
yep,
get in there.
yep, that's the big one. But they all sort of describe some future vision of even these little pocket parks of having some facilities, even if it's benches or whatever. But quite honestly, for a while, there'll be green spaces and, over time could potentially evolve. depending
Right.
on their use.
And there is a little bit of a marriage between this official map proposal and the zoning regulation revision that you also have in front of you, and that in the zoning regulation revision, these regs would for the first time obligate developers to actually build some
Yes.
publicly available
Yeah.
open space. And we give them the option of doing that within these official map identified areas so that, you know, they can help us realize that vision if it makes sense within their project.
How static are those? This is one question. Like, I know obviously some of these, like 31, 32, 33, 30, those are all sort of part of plans we know about, but like 36, and obviously now I see 34 and 35. How static? Like, for example, if I come in to do the Quinn property, number 36 up there, and I'm sorry, I think we're on the same page, but
Yeah.
let's say they've got a proposal say, you know what, I'm not going to build it up there, but what if I put it down on the road? Like, is that
Yeah.
flexibility there, or is it like, no, this is where it's got to go?
So the way that the official map works is we've baked into it with language that that these are approximate locations
Yeah.
and they can flex
Okay.
a little bit. But it's gotta pass a straight face test in
Yeah.
my mind.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
if 36 wants to be in a slightly different shape or a slightly different orientation, but in that general vicinity, I don't think that's an issue. If 36 wants to be down by the road, I think that's substantially different than what is shown. And so there's a process by which a developer can say, I want to make a revision to this, I have a better idea.
Yeah.
And with a planning commission endorsement, that can happen.
Okay.
And it can happen a bit faster than the process that we're going through right now. So there's both a mechanism for minor tweaks, and there's a mechanism for substantive changes. And then, of course, there's a developer who says, well, I just don't want to do it at all, change your official map, and then, you know, we have that conversation.
So the oranges are relative locations that the planning commission,
Yes.
like we said, this would be important because
So
trail
36 is a
connection up
good
by this.
example.
Yeah,
36
you know.
is adjacent to the town cemetery.
Yeah.
It's in an area of the property that's on the edge, but provides some wooded area as well as field space. And it's not on a slope, so that Quinn property rises up and then plateaus out. It's up on the plateau. So for all those reasons, that was the location that seemed to make the most sense. Similarly, number 33 is along the
Ridge
ridge
line.
line,
Yep.
and it encompasses the area that Jan Blumstrom already conserved and gave the town conservation easement rights to, but also incorporates that sort of westerly portion of the ridge where if you look up there, there's a big chair.
Yeah.
So it's that area as well, which is a beautiful viewpoint for the whole village. So that is somewhat baked into the master plan that she had put together. So yeah, some of these are better defined than others, but all of them have a reason for being
For being where they are, right? Okay.
34 is a more complicated
Yeah,
story.
35 was a very difficult conversation, I'm sure.
34.
34 is the one I was gonna bring up, so
Yeah.
let's just do it.
Right, so
So-
34 is the site where Hannaford is proposed to be located. And in the existing official map, the entire property, with the exception of that little snout out to
Yep.
Commerce Street, was identified on the official map. And you all know what happened with that.
Yep, so now if Hannaford's was to move forward, you know, it's in the process of going through, then this map would not apply to them.
Correct.
But
This
if
map would be
Hannaford's-
significant if the Hannaford project went down for some reason, or they walked away from it. Once you adopt this map, this would be the new official map that a new developer would have to work with. And what the planning commission tried to do was compromise. I think you went into your public hearing with the entire property marked as
Yeah.
a public facility again, and got substantial feedback saying, can't we do something a little less than that? And so this was a compromise position where the planning commission said we value the wetland areas and we're gonna identify those. And we value some smaller degree of public open space, and so we're gonna identify the area behind the post office primarily as that area. According to the wetland maps, it's out of the wetland, or at least a portion of it's out of the wetland, and the Lot 15 committee that was established a long time ago, back in 2011, I think, showed some plans for what could happen there in terms of active open space. What it does, this delineation of 34 does, is it leaves open for development without encumbrance from the official map the most developable portion of the site. So the area where the Hannaford was proposed principally, and that sort of northwest corner, which doesn't have very much in the way of wetland constraints, and therefore is more viable for other kinds of development.
So it allows for the commercial, it's sort of a compromise in between.
Yeah,
And
and
I think some of the, the issues around this lot and the environmental issues that were raised tended to be in that, orange area.
Right, and it's not just, I mean, obviously that it's wetlands there, but it's also the part that's adjacent to the canal walk, and is a logical extension of that.
Connectivity, right?
I'm
I
sorry?
don't want to speak for the planning, but connectivity.
Yeah.
The connection to
Yeah.
sidewalks and other parks and.
So what I heard at the last go-round with Lot 34 was the vast majority of the community wanted to keep that space as commercial because of what it offers. It offers everything underground. The water, the sewer, the electric, whatever else is there. It's the one lot left in the village that offers such a thing. So I was kind of shocked to see that such a large portion of that lot still on the official map after that extended conversation.
So.
And I really don't think a Commerce Street is a logical place for a park of really any kind, to be perfectly honest with you. When you when you travel down north on Mechanicsville Road and there's properties that seem to be a logical fit for a park or anything of the such.
Somebody that lives right up there on Mulberry Lane, I can tell you a great value for a park right there.
On that particular parcel, as opposed to maybe 100 yards down the road.
I will tell you that walking with kids, walking with dogs, walking with everybody along there, you've got that canal path that rips right along there. And even the empty park, you can't go into it, right? The layout, but it's part of that community. And I think that's a perfect place for a park. And it's not up to me, but who's to say that's always going to be commercial only?
Well, that's actually
Right.
a good point, because there is it's going to be part of our upcoming discussion as to whether we zone that area mixed use, so that, if a building, heaven forbid, is taken down or burns down, somebody could build 2 stories, residential on top. So that might be an option. We're also not planning. We're not looking at what's built today. We're planning, and we're planning for more development. Village Northwest, Village Northeast, although that's sort of up in the air. And this lot is centrally located. It's the absolute, geographic center of the village.
I think it was instructive for the commission, it certainly was for me, to look at the Lot 15 Committee's report, or at least documents, which are still up on the website. Thank you, Aaron. And in their documents, they showed various scenarios for full public use of that lot. Not like a portion this, a portion that, but like, could we have a municipal building here? Could we have just park space? And if you take the option that showed a municipal building and just imagine that being a commercial development, not public building, but private, commerce, it still allows for both. It allows for you to have that wetland preservation and park space over by the post office and the canal walk, while having a substantial commercial development. Clearly, not anything anywhere near as big as what Hannaford proposed, but still something sizable and significant. So I think that was the hope, Tom, that you could have both. And to be honest with you, that was my recollection when we adopted the first official map. We put that whole parcel on as a future public facility, it was never my thought, or based on our conversations, that we thought the entire facility would be public, but rather that there might be, you know, a small restaurant or an office building in conjunction with public spaces. And this just sort of codifies that we, you know, the town might have interest in the east side of the property that's largely impacted by wetlands, with some areas in the upland area, and then private commercial development on the better west side.
You know, I think this is a reasonable compromise. While, you know, I think a lot of the issues with the Hannaford was, one, it took almost the whole site, sort of very spread out, single story. You know, if in the future, if Hannaford's doesn't happen, with this there, this still would allow that many square feet. It would just be a two-story building probably. And, you know, I think a lot of the arguments against, I'll say, Hannaford's or that size, that spread out of a development, I think that this now addresses that in a reasonable way.
I don't want to minimize Tom's point though, because you're right, Tom. There was a large segment of the community that came out and said, let's work on the area behind the police and fire station. We've had that
Yeah,
for years,
yeah.
and we haven't done a whole lot with it. Why don't we work with what we already own rather than claiming new stuff that's sort of in a controversial state at the moment. But with that said, there were people on the other side, and so the planning commission, I tried to come down in the middle.
What's been the feedback from the landowners on this proposal?
Oh, I think the Dro family is pretty clear they would like there not to be any. I think they felt that your board's decision not to pursue the official map, not to pursue
Eminent
acquiring an
domain.
interest in the
Yeah.
property was indicative to them that the town didn't think this was a priority, and so they're thinking down the line, if Hannaford doesn't get approved, they don't want a future potential buyer to see this as an encumbrance on the property. So yeah, I think they would like it not to be there.
Yeah. And I think it would be if a future buyer, if we were to get to that point, again, would, you know, be limited in what kind of development it would be. But this doesn't prevent a commercial development there.
Right.
And in fact, you know, and I don't see this, my view of it, at least for a long time, I really just see it as protecting that, you know, wetland and providing that green space buffer, which it is now. As you say, I walk through there and, you know, you've got a little green area that's quite nice, and it's spread out. You know, there's a lot there, and, you know, if I was to walk by and envision a commercial or mixed development there, and that portion shown here, I think that would fit in quite nicely.
There's a lot to be said for having, you know, having parks along well-traveled, you know, our sidewalks and our trails. Yeah, in terms of accessibility.
I think it's a very important wetland, and I think not 50 years down the road, not even 10, I think 5 years down the road, we're going to be very grateful if we are able to keep this as a functioning wetland.
Oh, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead, sorry.
well, in that regard, it seems like you ought to show the sidewalk that's gonna be, it's on that, it's the road portion of what is lot 15. There's gonna be a sidewalk on there, and that
Yeah,
sidewalk.
coming down the, to connect that piece
Yeah.
of property.
Right, and it
Yeah.
ought to connect over to the
Right.
existing sidewalk.
Right.
Well, actually, we don't know that there's going to be a sidewalk coming into that property. I mean, there is in the Hannaford proposal.
Right.
Well,
But
wouldn't we want there to be a sidewalk to any
Well-
development that would happen there,
Maybe along that roadway,
along the roadway?
yeah, along the driveway, you would expect.
Yeah.
Depending on the business, I suppose, there might be a business that doesn't have
But
anybody.
I mean, as, you know, sometimes you like to cut corners. and you would want to walk through that park over to Commerce Street.
Mhm.
But, this is
Well, I
just-
think that the red line of the sidewalk to fill in
Yeah,
that section there is appropriate. And then maybe the red line goes down along the roadway access, just to show, hey, there's an expectation, whatever you put there, even if it's a business with 10 people.
Well, but remember, what we're showing are public infrastructure. So,
Okay.
for example, in the Haystack Crossing property and the Hinesburg Center, there are going to be vastly more sidewalks and roads than this map tries
Okay.
to show. I'm not convinced that that sidewalk entering official map area 34 or
Yeah.
lot 15, I'm not convinced that that necessarily would be a public sidewalk unless it had a through function like Andrea's talking about. But I don't know that is, I don't know that we know that would happen, especially with the wetland as a
Yeah.
possible
Right.
obstacle.
Okay.
That doesn't preclude a private sidewalk, and the DRB has the power to compel
Well,
those.
and they did tell, Hannaford's had that in their plan to.
Sure,
to-
yeah.
Okay.
So I have a question about number 20 and Stella Road.
Well,
Oh, are we
that
not
sounds
done?
good,
I'm
yeah. You know, I'm just looking, we want to move forward today. I don't know, how are people feeling, just a straw vote on what this shows now in the most controversial lot in town? Lot 34. Not lot 34.
15.
Right.
Lot
Area
15.
34.
It's official
area,
map,
now it's called
outline
Area 34.
34, it's lot 15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll just go around the room. Marilee?
Oh, I'm very happy with it. I think that's a really good compromise. Saves the wetland and has room for development.
Tom?
Not very happy with it.
Okay. And
wasn't pleased.
your preference would be to just take out that, or would it be an
Yeah, I think
adjustment to that?
there's more appropriate places within the village district for a community facility than on a commercial lot.
So the only piece that would show orange would be along the sidewalk, which is already there, I guess, which is already some public right of way. Jeff?
So I'm for it because part of this map is also looking forward. And today, while it is a commercial lot, and that's a commercial area, it may not be tomorrow. And I think we need to look, people that live there, people that, it's not just commercial and driving, we're trying to build something that's livable and walkable. So we have to find a balance, and I think it's a balance.
I think that you could put it in a different place. I like the idea, premise is fine. I don't know if commercial lot is exactly the place. The thought that it won't be commercial in the future is theoretical. I know it's a planning map, but, for instance, that landowner owns other lots there. Maybe it goes somewhere else down in this area here. But that is a commercial lot that the town wanted developed as commercial.
At one
but
point,
it was
yeah.
on the official map.
Okay. And so I'm all right with it. I think it's a good compromise. We could, argue or discuss whether that's the right size or not, but I think if this was to go forward at some point in the future to the DRB, then that would be incorporated in the plan one way or another, not exactly along those lines. All right, and obviously we'll have more public comment on this and other things by moving forward. So that was page 3.5. And we'll go right to the end, I guess.
Can I make a comment about the sidewalks again? That on Lyman Park, there is town has an easement where, you see the number 46?
Mm-hmm.
The town has an easement for the sidewalk to go between Lyman, where the
Oh,
little green
right,
thing is.
between those
Between those,
buildings?
between what is Lyman Park and the Lyman Park condos or whatever that other lot is.
To go from Lyman Park, between the buildings to their driveway, to the
No,
inside.
it goes on the south boundary line of Lyman Park.
Mm-hmm.
The easement goes
Yeah.
along there, and then it heads south and comes out on Lyman Park Road.
Through that parking lot area.
No, not through the parking lot.
I thought it goes through the buildings, but no.
It goes between,
It doesn't go through the buildings to the inboard section.
it
You're saying-
goes, there's a gravel base that's
Yeah.
got like that, and it goes like that. And it's an easement on this property, not on the condos, but
Okay.
on this one.
Yeah.
So when Farnham created this, the town got that easement. So
So
it
should
should
that be
show.
shown as a dotted line?
And then there's a gravel path underneath the grass there.
I think the planning commission would be happy to add elements that reflect, future or existing public facilities. If it's an existing path that is maintained and used, we can put it in as a black dotted line.
Well, it's an easement, and I think it's important that we don't lose it.
Well, so, yeah, this map doesn't reflect all easements, but it could be added if the select board sees this becoming a future public facility, i.e. a maintained path or a sidewalk. I've never heard any conversation that we intend to do that. All the sort of planning that we've talked about in the past, maybe just because I was naive about this easement area, was that we were going to try to formalize the pathway that comes out at the parking lot and try to create a sidewalk that continued along Lyman Park Road from the parking lot out to Lyman Meadows Road. But I don't know, maybe
Well, I
the
would just
residents
say
who
that
live
it-
there would be happier with the orientation you mentioned, Andrea, because I know they've had some concerns about.
Well, there's a culvert that was put in, the path was put in, there's an easement. I think to try and get another easement on that private road and through that parking lot is, that's work.
Right.
To get an easement. We already have an easement, so
Yeah,
I think you
it's an
just
interesting
should
point.
know that you have it.
Well, again, Lenore Budd, who's our Trails Committee Chair, has been working hard to document all of our various town easements. So we can make sure we don't lose it.
Okay.
I
But
think
as to
that's
whether we
reasonable.
put it on the map so that the future sidewalk goes that way instead of the way it's currently shown, I don't really know. I agree with Andrea. If we already have the easement, it's probably easier to do that. But I don't know if, I've never walked it. I don't know if
I
there are
walk that all the time, but I would never walk around that building. I walk exactly the way it shows.
You walk down the road and
Yeah,
over the
you
parking
sort
lot.
of a cut through to the parking to, it's, yeah, you almost can see it. So I thought that easement went, across the number's 46 through those buildings because there's an opening there. But I'm not sure that's the best way, but, I think it's important to at least, tell Lenore that,
Yeah,
let's
we'll do
make
that
sure we
because
don't
it
lose
hasn't
that
been on my
easement.
radar screen.
46. All right, so, any other questions? A note that, I know there's been some work on, I guess it wouldn't be on here, and I'm not suggesting it's on here, but the United Church looking at developing their small green space. But would be on private property at this point.
So I had a question about 18 Stella Road extension.
We're past that. No, sorry. Go ahead. 18,
Man.
yes? Sorry, I'm just joking.
Yeah, that's okay. You shut me down once. At one point, Alex, you had talked about that as a possible road to help the traffic, that people could take
Yes.
that as a shortcut and get to the Charlotte Road. Is that still an idea?
It is in my mind, and
Because it's not really clear from your description of Stella Road extension, that's why I'm asking. I mean, it could be, but vehicular traffic is kind of added like an afterthought.
you're right. The description doesn't really call that out. I'm happy to add that if you want. Yeah, the village 116 scoping study that we had done talked about the various kinds of improvements we could make to mitigate what is a parking lot on 116 during the peak PM hour. And the principal benefits accrued by the improvement to the CVU road intersection with 116 and an improvement to the Charlotte Road intersection. But all of the other connectivity improvements could have more limited impacts. And my recollection was that when Hannaford did their study, they said that if there could be a right-hand turn lane at the Charlotte Road intersection, it would make this intersection function much better. But that was impossible because the town hall has on-street parking and it's our handicap access to that first floor. So yes, having the cheese plant driveway connecting to Stella Road, providing essentially a right-hand turn lane for people looking to go west on Charlotte Road, I think would help. So if you want me to make that more clear as to the purpose in 19 and 20, I can do that. A different select board made it very clear that that the town was interested in one day owning Stella Road and the cheese plant drive, and that we wanted to put that in the zoning for the district, which we did, and have it on the official map. That was a different select board, so I'm not 100% sure if this select board still thinks that that's going to happen someday. We are going to have to drive that if it is going to happen.
Right.
Cheese plant owners are not supportive and are not going to just improve the road for us and then turn it over to us. So at some point, there's a Fisher Cut
At one
bait
point,
moment.
that's where the trucks had to go. Now they don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
so
don't
that's where
access
I see
Stella
the
Road.
value there is, I mean, you've got some businesses there that, generate truck traffic, and rather than dumping out on to 116, this might be the better way to go. I don't know.
You say, Alex, they're not supportive. Are they not supportive of paying, or are they not supportive of having access through there?
Either, both.
Really?
Yeah, they don't think it's a good idea to encourage public access or traffic through their
business,
industrial site.
Well,
But
If there was a sidewalk.
But they bought the property when the official map said that was going to happen. So they went into it with eyes wide open, and they've been counseled every time along the way that this is still our vision, and it may never happen, but at least we want to have the vision. But in fairness to them, they did comment on this proposal, and that was their comment. We remain opposed to this concept.
it would be definitely tricky, but I can seize value at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. Personally, I think it's a great idea.
I can
think
tell
it would
you
be very
that
popular.
the inhabitants of Farm Mile Drive are even less enthusiastic about
Yes.
the West Side Road.
But
Yeah.
the inhabitants of Charlotte and
Yeah.
Charlotte Road, they
Yeah.
would love it.
Although I do remember from that scoping study that, the percentage of traffic going south on 116 that
Pretty-
actually turns right on.
Not that much.
It's not
Yeah,
that much.
right.
It wouldn't,
But,
it would make a difference, but not a.
Right, but people coming from that business can go that way, and people going to the public house from the Charlotte Road could go that way. I mean, we're not encouraging people to say,
I think
this
it would
traffic's
be-
terrible, I'm gonna cut through all these little small streets and
I
try
thought
to
it would be
beat it.
one way. I thought that that's what you had said, that you wouldn't go from Charlotte Road to get to the public house. It would only be going south on 116. You could cut through to get to Charlotte Road.
That's a
Yeah.
possibility. Those
Right.
decisions are a ways off, because again, this board, this town will have to make a decision to
Yeah.
invest in that, and
Right.
until we do that, this is just a theoretical
I
conversation.
mean, I think potentially, as if development goes on for 10 or 20 years, I think it's important to have this there to show that that's potential access behind these buildings.
Has there ever been any thought of going further west? Meaning Lagoon Road up to Japrags, and then people could come down and go down Baldwin?
Yeah, it's been
Just throwing
talked
it out
about.
there, yeah.
Long
See
time
if we're
ago, we
straight
did
shot
a
on the
West
right.
Side Road feasibility study with the help of the Regional Planning Commission, and that was explored and deemed too cost prohibitive because of the La Platte flood hazard area and the need to cross the La Platte. Here, you can sneak across Patrick Brook and the canal and keep it close to existing infrastructure as opposed to way out there.
Are there any more comments? I'm just looking at the time. So you've picked up some of the comments we've already had, Alex. and some of them seem definitely appropriate. So the next steps would be you'd go back to the planning commission and talk about these little tweaks here. I think most of them are just tweaks.
Nothing
Yeah.
you've said requires enough of a change to worry about it. Some of these were Andrea's just sort of corrections to things too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would inform the planning commission about these tweaks, and then it would be up to you to schedule a public hearing. Now, you haven't talked at all about the zoning revisions, and I think it's important, even though the official map is the pretty product.
Yeah.
That's another proposal that warrants your attention, and it does take us in a direction that we haven't been before. You know, the official map is all about, you must accommodate a future facility. You don't have to build it.
Right.
You just have to leave enough room for us to build it someday. These zoning changes actually say, no, you will actually build something.
Yeah.
Not just your driveway and your parking lot and your building, but
Contribute to that.
some amount of actual green space that's publicly accessible. So I would encourage you to think about that, even if we have to talk about it at another meeting before you go to a public hearing.
So are you looking to, would you recommend moving those in parallel paths?
Yes. Well, on the
Close together?
Yes, I think that they complement each other. They are not mutually fully dependent, but they really do complement each other. So I think it makes sense to hold a joint public hearing on both if you're comfortable with
Okay,
that.
yeah.
I don't think those are in the packet, are they?
No.
Yeah, they'd have to, you're right.
So,
Yes, they should be. I think
I
they
don't
were
think
in your
they are.
July.
Well,
yes,
back then.
right, not
Back
in this
then,
one,
yeah.
right, yeah.
But not in this one.
So, what is our timing here? I mean, we're running into budget time.
Right, so the planning commission's hearing, public hearing was in February. You have a year from that date to fish or cut bait, otherwise the proposal's considered denied. So I would encourage you to think about a public hearing. Boy, it'd be good to do one in this calendar year, so
Yes.
you had some time to react in case
Yep.
there was serious public concern and you wanted to revise the proposal another time. But I know that's difficult, so
I mean, it would be difficult. The longer we wait, then we get into January and, nothing else is happening. So I would encourage us to maybe early in November, to have in the beginning of the meeting a public, hearing on it, open up the hearing and get some feedback and, see where people are standing. It may be that, there's not a lot of changes that are requested or throw the thing in the garbage, but, move forward. I don't know.
yeah,
So-
it's definitely a bad idea to expect public feedback once we're in the holiday season.
Yes.
So, from Thanksgiving week on,
Right,
it's
no,
just
no.
not really worth it
So-
if you really want public feedback.
Right, and I think it's fresh now with us, so,
What is your meeting schedule? Is it still going to be the first and third Mondays?
Wednesdays.
No, we're Wednesdays now.
Yep.
Okay. So the
This is
next,
just a one-time,
so the next meeting is
the 16th.
the 16th. Okay.
yeah. I mean, we could schedule a separate time, too.
Right.
It would be, I'll say, a shorter meeting, but it
What
would just be focused on this.
what are the November meetings, Renee, date wise?
November is
6 and 20.
6 and 20.
So both of those are before Thanksgiving, so you're still sort of in the clear.
So if we did it the 13th, which is the in-between time, still a Wednesday.
You
oh, that-
can't do
yeah,
Wednesdays,
okay.
because the planning commission, so we'd have to go back to a Monday like we did
So if we
tonight.
did a Monday in there and had it as a separate item, and the only item, unless we had some select board emergency, then we could start it and, public comments, probably an hour maybe, I don't know, maybe more, but.
I'll leave that up to you two to figure out. I don't want
Okay.
to dictate when you have it. I just would say try to do it
Yeah,
before
I agree.
Thanksgiving,
Yep.
or if you can't, then we're in January.
Yeah, that's not gonna be good, cause we're up against the deadline in February.
Yeah, Monday the 11th is Veterans Day, right? November?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. don't know if that impacts it or not. Oh, just saying.
So
Yeah.
we will need some time to warn a public hearing.
Yeah, what's the
And-
timing on that?
It goes in the Citizen, and so it's
Yeah.
essentially 3 weeks before, in order to get it in for the 15-day warning period. So if you want to talk about this anymore, we better do it at your
16.
next meeting, so that we can warn it for a November meeting. Yeah.
So if you warn the public hearing, does that mean these changes are adopted? Is that how this works?
It doesn't mean they're adopted, but it means that any applications received after the warning have to be reviewed under these regulations.
Yeah, so
And if they are ultimately not adopted, those applications then can be re-reviewed, since the regs didn't actually come to
Right,
pass.
if there was a petition and they got voted out or not voted in by us.
Or if you just chose not to
Yes.
adopt them, yes.
Right.
It's an
Okay.
odd provision in statute, but it's designed to not let folks sneak in while a community has, done substantial work to change their regs. So yeah, that's a good point. I think you ought to be comfortable enough when you warn a hearing so that you're not, it isn't just I don't really care about this, let's see what people say.
Right.
Hopefully it's this seems good, the planning commission's
Well, I mean,
proposal is right,
yeah.
and we're gonna move forward.
And I'll give
with
my
it.
opinion, I mean, I'm feeling there's a lot of work here, we've seen it. We've talked about a couple little tweaks, we got one controversial piece in it. But, I mean, I'd like to take the planning commission's work and move it forward. And the map has not been updated for 10 years,
Right.
and it's a tool that we use. Thoughts, anybody? I'm getting, it's after 9:30.
Right.
No, I agree with you, Phil. I think that was well stated. There's a lot of work that's gone into it, and I think it would be appropriate to bring it to a public meeting in November.
But the plan is to have one more discussion, let the public know.
Well, do we need another discussion?
It's,
That would be.
it's just that the zoning change that you haven't talked about at all yet.
Right.
Sure, we're talking design standards and.
The design
Yeah.
standards, so if you're all comfortable with that, I think
So-
I can make the tweaks, and Renee and Joy and I can warn a public hearing for whenever it makes the most sense. But if you want another meeting, you wanna talk about that piece of it at your next meeting, I'm
Since
happy
they,
to come back.
it might be good.
I think
yeah,
so.
that might be good. But I think we can move forward with the other piece, get the ball rolling, pick a date and all that.
Okay.
So we do keep it rolling. I don't want it to end up being January and we don't have time. And I think, if we can do it in the next 4 weeks, that would be good. Thoughts, is that all right? Okay.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like we'll want to look at those, re-look at those zoning changes, and that's in our packet in July.
It's also
So-
in here tonight.
Okay,
Yep,
excellent.
Stephanie.
And there were some other things in there, but that was the most substantial piece, one of the most substantial pieces, right?
There are really only just two pieces,
Yeah.
the official map and the design standards, that's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you again, Alex. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you.
Andrea?
Thanks for
Thank
taking
you.
all the time, it seems like these discussions are always lengthy, but we're happy to be here.
All right.
All right.
Renee, did you just add it to our packet?
I moved it from the July one into this one.
So I'm just not seeing it, but,
It's 7E.
Just refresher.
yeah, I don't know how to do that.
Well, we're not gonna read it now, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, the next thing is the draft of the winter sidewalk maintenance policy. I think Renee and her team has talked about this at least for 1 year, if not more,
Yeah.
that it'd be nice to have a policy, so if somebody says, hey, yeah, you did this, or you kind of tore up my lawn, you could say, well, it's really the right of way, and, and here's our policy. Not that we want to do that, but today we don't have anything. And so, it was in our packet.
And a policy that speaks to the level of service that we want for
Yes.
the sidewalk, especially winter sidewalk maintenance. Are are we guaranteeing it after a certain amount of time after a storm? So, as we looked at other towns, 24 hours, they weren't guaranteeing it prior to the 24 hours, so it wasn't like an immediate response. And it was based on, in some cases, what's that?
When it stops snowing.
When it stops snowing, and based on priority of, when there's people available. As long as it's clearly written out in some sort of policy, when we get those phone call complaints or the emails, we can direct them to, this is the policy. So after, do we send our plow out after 2 inches of snow, after 3 inches of snow? So those kind of details should be outlined in policy.
And I think it goes both ways, Hey, I got 8 inches of snow and it's 3 days later. Your policy says you'll take care of
Absolutely.
it. So,
Yeah.
Tom, you've got experience here, and did you get a chance to take a look at this?
I
I mean,
have
it's
been.
new for everybody,
Yeah,
so.
I think it's a good idea. I think it's just impractical to think that you can get to every inch of sidewalk
Right.
even in 2 days,
Right.
depending on how heavy the storm is.
I think when I brought this to you guys last time, I used the Williston model, and they had a map at the time, and it looks like they've changed on their website, but it showed they don't maintain all of their sidewalks, so they have it shown on their map where they do in the order of priority.
Actually, yeah, because
That's
when
how
I,
it used to be.
yeah, when I went and looked at it, they have about 18 miles and they maintain about at that time, about 1.8 miles. When looking at ours, I felt like we have about 5 and soon to have a little bit more than 5, but with a major focus on the school.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, I'm trying to find my words, basic necessities, wanting people to be able to get where they need to go, be it essential services in schools. And you can't really cut off any part of our sidewalk system and get to those areas. So it says, okay, let's cover them, but let's understand that we're not going to begin that process or commit to beginning that process before 24 hours has passed.
So just my thought as somebody who's been in that machine.
Yes.
2 areas that I think are walkable even without sidewalks, and the sidewalks are just absolutely miserable to maintain in the wintertime, is Thistle Hill and Creekside.
Yeah.
They are a bear. Because the trees are beautiful and they're nice, but they cause real problems
To get around
in
them.
Creekside. Thistle Hill is just the steepness and the way it drifts and the tightness, especially on the northern side.
Yeah.
I guess, is that Mulberry?
Yeah. It's not really Thistle, but yeah.
It's almost absurd really to try to maintain those after a heavy snowstorm.
The town doesn't. The town doesn't today.
Yeah,
They stop.
a lot of
come
times they
down and then
stop,
they go off
yeah.
on the road, and so
That's
most
an
of-
adjustment
most
we
of the
made,
thing,
yeah.
Yeah.
stays-
But going
so-
up the Thistle Hill side is just as crazy. You have to
Yeah.
go up and down.
Yeah.
I mean, that's on the significant, a foot or more.
Right.
The other times you can get to them.
So those are the specific details that are to Hinesburg that we should be
Right.
Yeah,
adding
I think so,
to a
yeah.
policy like this, so.
I think a color-coded map of what will be done within the first few hours,
Uh-huh.
what will be done within 24 hours, and then those areas that might not get
You,
done.
you call them challenging, and
At
if
all.
they can, they'll get done,
Yeah.
but may not get done.
Right. And I know Essex, I've talked to John, he lives in Essex, and they only do very, very small percentage of
Yeah.
their overall sidewalks in the wintertime.
Doesn't Burlington require you to shovel your own?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a wide range.
So, I mean, this, do we want to add some? I mean, let's say some people want to shovel their sidewalk and choose to. Does that impact people who are doing the sidewalk? Or it's like, oh, this little section, you probably run into it. Oh, the people did their little section, or no? They don't, unfortunately, because when I grew up, we had to do our sidewalk.
We did
Yeah.
have that time when our tool cap broke
Right,
down, and so I put
people
something
did,
out on Front
yeah.
Porch Forum,
Yeah.
and people actually did start shoveling in front of their.
What I was gonna ask, because it broke down right in front of my house, it was great day. So 4.3 talks about the level of service be limited to what can be provided by mechanical equipment. Does that cover the, I'm just worried, what if it breaks down again and we've set an SLA, we've set an agreement that we'll have this done within 2 days, but our equipment broke down.
Well, I think that's something we could.
Is that something we
Yeah.
need to filter
I
in
think-
here, or does that
I
cover
think
that?
those are things that we could add. That's detail that we can certainly add, we should add.
Go rent something.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And my other thing is if you're in the area that doesn't get covered, what's the liability of the town in an unmaintained sidewalk and somebody slips and cracks their head open?
Well, I think this helps.
Yeah, okay.
Having,
I
a,
would think that it
having a
helps in
policy
saying
in
this
place
is
is
policy.
definitely,
I bring up the two areas, the Thistle Hill and Creekside, because in my opinion, those roadways are safe enough to walk on. The traffic is
The
slow.
roads are, yeah.
yeah.
The roads are,
Yeah.
so it makes the maintenance of the sidewalks just kind of silly, really.
That's what most people have adopted to once it stopped. They
Right.
just
But in
go down the
Creekside,
driveway
once
onto the
tree's
road and
empty, is it easy to go through there?
No, not anymore. They're just too big, you damage the machine, and you really can't see where you're going. So tearing up somebody's lawn isn't a matter of if,
Right.
it's how much.
Yeah.
But this has become an increasingly significant issue because people are calling
Yeah.
a lot now. They're calling, they're emailing, and because their expectation is higher than what they're seeing. And so I think we need to put it on paper in a policy
Yeah.
that we can direct them to.
And I'd be all right with showing those in a different color, saying,
Yeah.
We already have it for the roads.
It seems to me we should just do the downtown areas. I don't know why we would do Creekside and Thistle Hill, they're just residential. We need to do on 116 and probably the pathways to the schools. But I don't know why we need to do the residential areas.
Well, that's been the expectation, that's why this is in front of us,
Right,
to try to change that expectation.
yeah.
a few people were scratching their head like, why is the sidewalk like that?
Andrea?
So, I think this is a good idea, but I also feel like, it's saying pedestrians don't count, because where's the road policy? What's the level of service that people expect on the roads? And, there ought to be, people complain about their mailboxes getting hit, and that the road's not plowed, and, I just think it's kind of, I personally think that people have too high of expectations on our roads, and that, when we have 3 people trying to maintain those roads, and they're up at 2 o'clock in the morning to do it, because people think they need to be out at 5 o'clock in the morning, then we should have a road policy too, that says, hey, you know what, we can't get there.
Yeah.
So you're in favor of this? saying this
Mostly,
is-
the
yeah.
one thing that I am concerned about is the ice.
I saw that
It
too.
says,
Yeah,
we're not gonna do anything about ice.
yeah.
And to me, that is way worse than walking through
Yeah.
snow.
I
It's
saw that
easy to
too.
walk through snow, so, and I realize it is hard to address the ice situation, but in, the kind of winters that we're having, it's, I'd like to see us,
Rather than say no, which it says,
you know,
and we have, we've tried to do a little sand occasionally,
Yeah.
so.
So
It
Mike
seems that-
Mike just texted, we do have a policy for the roads.
well, it should be, the select board ought to look at
We
it.
can
Yeah.
do
The
that.
public ought to
Yeah,
look
Okay,
at
and
it.
all right, let's talk about this. So, do we wanna put something in about ice, sanding and salting?
Well, we don't salt the sidewalks,
No?
it's not
Yeah,
good
we-
for the concrete, right?
No,
We
I think
salt.
we do,
Well, it's,
yeah,
yeah,
You mix
I mean-
a little bit of salt in the sand or it'll freeze.
yeah.
you can't spread sand without salt.
I
So-
just didn't think we did.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
It's kind of a pain in the
so,
butt, I'll be honest with you.
It says, yeah, it says no, and what I'm saying is, no ice will be done. Maybe there's another way of rewording
Right,
that says minimal ice capability.
I think what it talked about in some of the policies is that the ice the salt had a negative impact on cement.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
So-
On
And
the
the
trees
equipment
too.
too, but the cement.
I mean, I'm looking at Milton, for example, it says right on it, unless in a highly unusual event, salt and sand are not used on sidewalks due to the damage they cause to concrete and the spring cleanup efforts required.
Yeah.
I guess that's a
That
reasonable
seems reasonable.
statement, but there
Yeah.
are times when it's dangerous,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and I don't wanna see somebody.
Well, I mean, it is, that's what that said. What was it? Read that statement again?
Unless in a highly unusual event, salt and sand are
Yeah,
not.
that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Saying,
We
hey,
could
you know, we
add those
might have a
words.
time when, hey, let's get out there and spread some, because for
Yeah,
3
it's,
days,
it's,
it's
it's
just
not
been
just
icy.
that it damages the concrete, it gets into the water. Our
Right,
chloride
environmentally,
levels
it's
are
not
really high in the
good.
water, it damages the
Right.
trees.
Right.
We could reduce the amount of
Yeah,
salt
right.
on
It-
the
it-
roads
it's
too.
not- nothing
I mean,
like
that's
compared
like
to-
way worse.
Okay, yeah. So I'd be okay with that type of
Adding the-
statement that sort of
Uh-huh.
says, don't expect it. And I think that's reasonable because, and any day, even when it looks like the sidewalks are clear, there's gonna be an icy spot. And, you know, this is saying, hey, we're not taking care of that. We're not, you know, we're not like UVM that's gonna go out every single day
Right.
and check those sidewalks and apply sand and salt anytime there's a little melt and refreeze.
Yeah,
I
like
will need-
Crampon said.
Yeah,
Oops.
I will need to revisit with VLCT because I know last year we had so much ice and there were so, you know, ice was a problem everywhere and there was a lot of people, they were having slips and falls. And so, I'll have to just check with them as far as what is best practice for a policy in
No,
sidewalks.
I think
Yeah,
that's,
good
yeah,
idea.
right, because we don't wanna hold ourselves
call
up.
Yeah.
Any more comments on this? Obviously, we're not gonna decide on it, and we'll come up with another draft
Yeah.
for review. I like the idea of the map, you know, if we wanna say a couple of areas, you know, are not our focus, not that we wouldn't go do it, but don't expect it, kind of thing.
Or an order of priority.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
So does 4.6 cover fencing? Towns not responsible for incidental damage to turf, driveways, irrigation, or any landscaping improvements located in the public right of way or easements.
That's a fence.
Right, because most of the damage I've seen is the fences.
That fence down below your roof,
Yeah, I know.
on your stretch. Oh.
My fence only got broken because the cat fell into it.
Okay? Are you okay with
Yeah.
the feedback? Thanks, Joy, for working on
Yes.
this. Next item is Budget Buster Leaf Debris Blower. I only said that because Mike's listening.
So I wanted to correct what I put in the summary. So in the current budget, in the current year, we had in the capital plan for purchasing a mulcher in this year. He did look into those, so what he was gonna do was one of the leased ones that were, you know, now being sold. And the price have gone up on those, so it's way out of the $5,000 mark that we had targeted for it. However, this leaf debris blower does fit within that 5,000 range, and he feels like it's gonna be very beneficial. And it's a newer, it's something that's relatively new, and he felt that he can, in the shoulders where there's been riprap, you can get the leaves out of that. There's a lot of benefits to this leaf debris blower. It feels like it would be good use of the funds for this year.
So you can blow all the snow off the sidewalks.
Yeah.
Well, there we go.
After
They're
the plow truck.
perfect.
See if he comments about
This
that.
attaches to truck?
Tractor.
Seafoam
Tractor.
Daniels looks like this.
Okay.
Do we know how
Oh, I
far
see.
above budget the mulcher was?
I don't know that he mentioned, he just said it was
Significant.
significantly far, further than he felt comfortable to even ask on that.
I guess, two comments. One is, on one side, when I had a road to maintain, I always blew the leaves out of the ditch before the winter came because it just makes it work. So it seems like this, you know, is a process that does help going forward. But then the other side of me says, so are we gonna get a budget item for this year for the mulcher that's instead of 5,000, 15,000? And should we just take this 5 and save it up if the mulcher was the number one priority?
So he's saying that both, both are gonna be beneficial while he's recommending the debris blower for this year. He still will want the mulcher at some point, but he wants it when the price is better and not when they're high. He said it's $3,000 to $4,000 higher than the expected, so I'm assuming that means 8,000 to 9,000.
Yeah, I mean, the mulcher gets used probably less frequently than this leaf blower thing will be. And it seems like there might be an opportunity to buy a used mulcher.
That's what he was trying, that was he was getting.
Yeah, so he can find a used mulcher at the opportune time.
That's what, and these are
Yeah.
even higher, even the used ones right now,
Right.
were high, so he didn't
Yeah,
wanna
okay.
get them now.
So I have one of these things, and they work great.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Yeah, he's seen
What do they
other
look
highway
great
departments that are used them.
You'd be surprised what
Yeah,
they
I
work
think
great
you tell me.
for. Well, I mean, you can move leaves
I
like,
have no concept of why you would want this thing.
oh yeah, that's
Clean out
Tell
very
me
functional.
something. Tell me something about it. Why would I want one?
Oh, you can clean a roadside ditch out in,
Yeah, they fill up with leaves and
Yeah.
then
And
it
Culverts.
just gets
and
frozen
functioning.
solid in there.
it's probably functional because you can, it's a PTO 3-point hitch, so you could actually like back it down near a culvert and blast it,
Yeah.
and it would clean them right out. It's probably gonna be pretty functional.
He's seen it used in the highway departments and I think Starksboro has one.
I think he was saying how
So it's
efficient
very-
it was in terms of time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So we had budgeted
Okay.
5 in there for the mulcher, so this is, right? Is that right?
Yes, he just made a comment. He goes, I'll just use his. Yours. That would be regional leaf blowing.
Right.
Mine's a toe behind
Oh, there
though.
it is, I didn't look at that. Yeah,
Yeah.
now I see, yeah.
All right.
If you wanna poof your hair, it'll really work.
All right, any other questions?
So you were saying this is 500 more than what was budgeted? Is that what, were you commenting on that?
No, I was saying that basically the equivalent of what was already budgeted. This is 500 more, but
Right.
it's close enough, I think.
Yeah.
So we just would need a motion by somebody who really has used these things and seems to feel they're very valuable.
Unless he's making a motion to share his.
If you're all right with that, I don't know.
I would ask him to check out a Turf Co too, though.
Check
I
out
think
what?
they're a Turf Co model. I know the Buffalo turbine is a pretty popular one, but there are other options
Okay.
that
Well,
may be
sure, he's
cheaper. I'm not
listening to
just
you
not
right
sure
now.
if they're 3-point hitch or not. This seems to be a new style.
So, I mean, we could make a motion to, spend up to $5,500
Sure.
to
Yeah, let him
leaf-
worry about where to get it.
leaf debris blower.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
To authorize up to $5,500 to purchase a leaf and debris blower in lieu of the mulcher
For this year.
for this year.
Yeah, he seconded it for you.
Okay.
Yeah, you already got your second.
Any more discussion or texting?
Not yet.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Next is the budget development process, so we have our assignments, we're in here, and then schedule.
Yeah.
And the schedule is always flexible, but I think you put all the plan to be at least 3 weeks in January, making our final decision.
Right.
That
Yeah,
seems-
so those are devoted to the select board budget work sessions so that we try to just be specifically budget focused. I would have liked, we're starting earlier than we have, but I still would have liked to have started even earlier. But there's always so many other agenda items that keep, and again, tonight, we're hearing more that we're gonna have to make room for in November, so. It's really important to be, reaching out to your department heads, obviously they haven't generated their budget, but you can be
Right.
talking about it and talking
What they're
about what they're
thinking.
thinking of and sort of kind of get that.
So they need to have, let's say, the police department needs to have their budget after all of the discussions and whatnot, ready on which date here?
So they would be returning it, let's see.
Is it from November 1st to the 8th?
Yes, those are when we'd be
basically
having
ready.
those meetings. Yeah, so
So our
they'd be.
meetings with our, as budget buddies or
Yeah,
whatever we
so
are.
November 1st is
before
a
that.
Friday.
Yeah.
And then it's all of the following week. I'll be scheduling those meetings.
And those are meetings we come to too.
Yeah, so you would
Yeah.
come for the police and the fire one
Yeah.
with myself and those department heads. And likewise, each other select board member with their associated department. And at the same time, you'll be meeting with the boards and committees and, reaching out to them that are associated with the departments as well. So I provided that list to you in your adopted department budget cycle.
All
So
right.
for me being the newbie, where can I get the contact names?
I can give those to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you can find them on the website too, but actually, for contact information, it isn't for all of the boards, there
Okay.
isn't contact, so
Yeah,
I
so I can reach out
I
to
can
them, 'cause I wouldn't
certainly
know. Okay.
give you all of that.
Thank you.
I think
You're
just
welcome.
giving them a call and saying, have you been thinking about this? And
Yeah.
for some of the smaller committees, just to get them rolling.
Yeah.
All right, anything else? I don't wanna skip things. I mean, I appreciate you putting this together. This looked reasonable to me.
There you go, yeah, you blow off our solar panels.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Learning all about these things.
I think that's a good, well, maybe it's okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what they're advertising it.
All right,
That's
all
it.
right. Next item, town administrator report, and we had 4, 5, 6 highlights that
Yep.
were given to us
Well, yeah,
in summary.
so as you can see, there has been progress on the Village North sidewalk.
Yes.
I don't really have anything awful to report tonight. I know
It's
you're
coming
all
together.
disappointed. So yes, forward progress has been made, and you're actually seeing what a sidewalk's starting to develop.
So, progress there, that
Progress
looks
there.
good.
The CSWD drop-off center is returning to Hinesburg. We signed a lease earlier this week. It looks like they made a couple of revisions, so I'll be taking a look at that tomorrow morning, and then we'll, finalize it yet again.
Hopefully they're just tweaks and
Yes.
whatnot, so
Yeah.
that's good.
Been spending a lot of time with this discussion regarding
Yes.
the future of the ambulance service. And then the FY21 budget preparation, which is where I'd really like to have my time focused. And so I've got a draft to send out to all of the department heads, and I've got to put in, on their budget sheets, I put in how their year ended at the end of FY19. So I put in all of that information on the revenue and the expense side, so that they can look back and for the last few years, so they can start developing their budget. I'll include the capital plan as it is right now and the payments for all of the equipment and vehicles, and so that's included as well to update the capital.
And we'll get a first quarter report, budget report
Yeah.
in the next meeting or two.
Yeah.
Yep,
So-
all right, that's always helpful to look at that, just to double check.
Yeah, and the income survey process is going. Joy's been working with Mark from RCAP, and you can update where we are on that.
We have received some names of tenants that we did not have. So we're working at making sure we have the greatest representation possible. From those areas, we have a little envelope stuffer to go into the meter reading, which should go out, I believe, this week. So people know that the survey will be coming their way. We're making progress. Things seem to take a little bit longer than we had hoped, but I think we are really moving forward. And we should have a survey going out. I don't want to say shortly, because that might be being robust, but we're getting there.
And this is important for the USDA funding. So it's the biggest chunk if we can move forward. So,
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely important.
Yes.
all right.
And I mentioned to you the Hinesburg Fire Department. So feedback, I mean, this has been a rather challenging process, and there's been a lot of strong emotions on each side, and there's been a lot of frustration within the department. I think it would, they've communicated that they would really like to have select board members to attend their meetings and kind of show up and show that you are paying attention and see what they do, because they feel like they're, you know,
Invisible.
they're
Yeah.
invisible. I mean,
Yeah.
those are the words they used.
I think the chief said, sometimes it's for them, and they're all volunteers. The police, you see them driving around all the time and catching people and, doing stuff. And the highway crew, you see them certainly in the winter. And if you live on a dirt road, you see them coming and grading, and, you just see lots of stuff happening. And the fire and rescue, unless you're very unfortunate, they're not coming to your house, and you might see them drive by, but that's it. So, I think and it's probably true that, in a way, they're let's say, taken for granted.
Right, and they certainly there have been posts on Front Porch Forum of great gratitude.
Yes.
For people for whom they've really served them well, but they feel that the select board really doesn't appreciate the work that they do, particularly the select board. So that's why it would be great if we could get to their Wednesday night at 7 p.m. meetings.
But if we could sort of coordinate that so not more than 2 of you show up at once,
Yeah.
I would,
All right, 'cause
that would
then
make
it's
my
a
life a little
quorum.
better.
Right, then it's a quorum, right.
Right.
All right. Anything else for Renee? Or Joy? Select Board Forum?
I want to express gratitude again to Renee for taking the reins on this ambulance thing and working so hard on it. I don't know how you had time to do anything else. It seemed to me like I spent the whole week in meetings. But thank you very much. I'm really happy that we've gotten as far as we've gotten.
Yeah, we did make a big, leap forward.
Yep.
Anything else? I had a couple of items. We had a conference call with Wayne Elliott, just to sort of get a quick update on the wastewater treatment. We talked about the funding and gave some feedback with the representative meeting we had. I am going to put out just a little summary to the representatives and a couple of things they said they would do for us, just to make sure they do that. So I'll get that out this week and keep them informed of our process. So we'll do that. Then the next, not news to Scooter, but at the end of the month is the annual United Church Chicken Pie Supper. Last Saturday, and it's a big community event, and reservations, you can make them for 2 different seatings. Anything else? We have the minutes from 9:18 in our packet. Is there a motion to, this is usually you, Aaron.
Yeah, I'll make that motion for you.
I'll second it.
Approve with any necessary amendments.
All right. I had a few. About, on the first page, about halfway down, Ginny Lyons asked if the town has a stormwater utility, and I think we should put there, the answer is no. I think we said no, but it would be good to put in there. And then in that same paragraph, Ginny said she does not know if there's a way to find a reduction in the cost or extent required to improve wastewater system. And just to make it clear, I would put, or if the town has some sort of stormwater mitigation offsets that might help reduce the costs. So I think the term is offsets in there.
Can you read that again, Phil? I'm not quite sure. I want to make the correction on my notes. Can you read the whole sentence
Yeah,
with your correction?
I'll try to. Ginny said that she did not know if there was a way to find a reduction in the cost or extent required to improve the wastewater system, or if the town has some sort of stormwater mitigation. Some sort of stormwater mitigation by using offsets, which might help reduce the cost, or something
Thank you.
similar to that.
Something like that.
Yeah. So it would be, we try to apply offsets to reduce phosphorus through stormwater versus the wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you very much.
And then in the next section, still on the first page toward the bottom, the discussion of recent changes to the drop-off center. I thought at the end, we did authorize Renee to sign the lease.
Yes.
I'm assuming it was a motion, maybe it wasn't, but,
There wasn't a motion.
okay, so, the select board said Renee's authorized to sign the lease. And I guess I'll keep going on page 2. And the considering approval of the used angle broom for sidewalk plow. At the end of that, I mean, you might, I think it'd be worth saying, there was some discussion to up the town administrator's approval level to $5,000.
Right, yeah.
And, you know, we can take that up in the future. Were there any other comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciated the minutes, and they really helped me understand a lot of things. I thought they were very clear. At the end, review of minutes from 9:0419, Val left a blank. Aaron moved to approve the minutes from 9:419 as amended, second by blank.
Oh my gosh.
I thought you did that intentionally.
They weren't seconded, they weren't approved, nothing. I'll get that off the VCAM.
Well, maybe somebody
who was.
remembers who seconded it. Maybe it was me, I don't
Try not to remember such kind of stuff.
I can get it off the.
know. Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, when I posted it online, I just put a blank spot there. Like I made an underline. I figured we'd address it tonight. So, yeah, send it over and I'll just.
All set, Mary Lee, was that?
Yep, that was all I found.
All right.
It was pretty obvious.
So with those changes, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Aye, so that's passed, good. We have the warrants behind me. There
Nope,
was
I moved them over here.
oh, there was one extra page I did miss.
I noticed
It was
that
like
too.
one item
I
on
just
the
signed it.
page. So they were reviewed.
I'll make a motion to approve the warrants to include payroll as presented by the clerk.
Second.
Seconded, all right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thanks for that. We do not need to move into executive session. Is there any last minute details?
When is our next meeting?
October 16th, it's a Wednesday. We're back to Wednesdays.
The Wednesdays.
A week from Wednesday.
Yeah,
Okay.
all right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
All right,
Seconded.
and seconded by Mary Lee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. So it was a late night, later than usual. I can feel it, but there was a lot
23 minutes.
going on.
Right,
Honestly,
yeah.
that's not bad.
Yeah.
Good job, Phil, navigating
Yeah.
through those long issues.
I tried to skip a couple of items on the agenda, but nobody would let me do it.